It is 7 o'clock. We'll call this meeting to order. Bailey, can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Bain.
Here.
Councilmember Husnick.
Here.
Councilmember Eigner.
Here.
And Mayor Winnig.
Here. I'd ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll look for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Do we have a second on that?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, that brings us to the open forum. Bailey? Jim Redfield? Oh, it is Jim Redfield.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I am Jim Redfield. I live on Lipizzan Trail. Good evening. I am here tonight as a concerned citizen. I was thinking about that term, and I got to thinking that almost everybody who addresses you is probably a concerned citizen, concerned about something or other. But my major concern is that Forest Lake may lose our residential treatment center. I'm going to talk to you about 3 specific reasons for my concern, please. Okay. All right. Well, I understand that the council and the mayor will be considering a change in the zoning code on April 9th, I believe, to allow the Hills Youth and Family, Cambria Hills, to go forward on their project here in Forest Lake. And the cost of the project is estimated at about $20 million to build. I've heard that folks from Cambria Hills have a perception that the mayor and city council do not want children and youth with mental needs in the Forest Lake. I do not believe that perception at this time. Anyway, there are youth, children, and adults in Forest Lake now with mental health issues. Some of them are being treated, some of them are not.
Can I interrupt you for a quick second? Mm-hmm. You said the people from Cambria Hills said we don't want that?
They were talking about that, yeah.
Well, that's awfully sad to hear.
Pardon me?
Go ahead.
Yes.
It's kind of sad to hear that they have misconceptions like that, but go ahead.
Yeah, they do have that misconception. That's a perception. Another reason for my concerns is that I have heard that other cities want to get our treatment center. Remember, the Forest Lake Community City Council did not have to seek out this opportunity. It kind of came like an early Christmas present to us. So let's not give this away. This brings me to another reason for my concern. There seems to be a lack of action by people concerned with the economics and growth of our community. I've not seen anyone from Economic Development Commission taking a position on the treatment center. I have not seen any members of the Chamber of Commerce. I have not seen any members of the business community except for one realtor that was presenting. So I think we need to hear from people relative to this support of the center. I ask you to uphold the Planning Commission and vote the change in zoning at your next meeting when you decide this. Thank you and good evening. And have a good meeting.
Thank you. And that is all we have signed up for the open forum. So I'll look for approval of the consent agenda or changes there too. I would like item 6F removed for further discussion.
Mr. Mayor, I would also like items 6A and 6C removed. So I would make a motion that we approve the consent agenda, removing items A, C, and F.
All right, we have a motion. We have a second on that?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, item 6A.
Just a minor nit, Mayor, that we have a Winnick Supply invoice listed on page 21 of the packet, just needs to be removed and moved on to the Winnick Supply invoices.
Oh, yeah, because they're already on the, all right, thank
I
you.
would make a motion that we approve all of the invoices, moving the Winnick Supply invoices to the end of the agenda.
All right. We have a motion?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And one abstain. And then item 6C.
Continuing my annoying nit comments, the meeting minutes for March 12th are just missing the meeting header, and so I wanted to just make sure that when we approve that, that gets put back in, just so it's clear of date and time, and all of those details are just missing from the formatting.
All right.
All other content, my motion would be that we approve the amended meeting minutes with a header added.
Do we have a second on that?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. And item 6F. I just wanted to clarify, or maybe we'll hear from the council, but the playground equipment grant application would be applicable to whatever park we decided to put on? Is it still listed just as Lakeside Park only?
I think the Parks Commission had met to discuss that, and they felt Lakeside Memorial Park, for this particular grant application, was the park they wanted to put the application forward to. One thing to keep in mind as you look at this application, there are 2 bailout points for this, so it's just basically if the grant is accepted, the city is not required to accept the grant if it's awarded. They just kind of wanted, when they had their internal discussion, they did feel that Lakeside Memorial Park, because Jamie did bring that information back and asked them, to consider other parks, but the Parks, Lakes, and Trails Commission felt strongly to put that application forward for Lakeside Memorial Park.
Okay. I have concerns about that. I think I expressed them before. I think there's just too much activity there. We're going to eat up a lot of real estate with, really limited outcome, limited success. I fully support having a completely accessible park, playground. I just don't think that Lakeside Memorial Park is the best spot for it. We have so many activities there, and we could use that for a lot more.
So it was my understanding that the footprint actually for the equipment was not any larger than what we have right now. And I
A
appreciate.
lot less equipment for the same size footprint is, I think, what we were looking at there. And very limited age uses for that equipment.
I guess I would encourage us to continue to pursue the grant funding and allow the conversation to continue to evolve with Parks, Lakes, and Trails on location, nature of the equipment, and let's make that decision down the road if we have the opportunity to make that decision. Should we be accepted for grant funding? I don't think that, I looked at this as an opportunity to go after the revenue, knowing that we would continue the conversations on what we would do specifically with it, locations, nature of the equipment. I think it is, in conversations with some of the Parks, Lakes, and Trails members since their meeting, I think they'd like the opportunity to talk further about that and explore and clarify age range, nature of the equipment, what's going to be provided. So for that reason, I was going to support this tonight.
We could, because everything is written as Lakeside Memorial Park, and I'm just concerned that's going to limit us down the road. I'd rather table this till next meeting, or I don't see it being good for the city to have it there. We may be getting a grant, but we're going to have to spend twice as much to get that grant, and we need to explore other options. I don't see it being the best benefit, the best fit at that park.
Just 2 points of clarification on this. The grant application is actually due this Friday, so if you table it, we would not be able to apply for the grant application. Secondly, the Parks, Lakes, and Trail Commission did discuss some of the feedback around adding more activities for teens, because that brought up at the last workshop. There is some secondary plans going for Belts Park at this point to add some more teen-based activities to that specific park. So that feedback was brought back to the Parks, Lakes, and Trail Commission and was discussed at the meeting. And I think, again, at the end of the meeting, basically, they felt that probably the best application moving forward for the city was to put this in Lakeside Memorial Park because of some of the visibility features there, and it would, potentially fit within the existing footprint of the current playground equipment that is in that park.
Good.
The language to apply for the grant could not be amended to just be any of our parks? I don't want to forego the window to get the grant in.
Yeah, I thought there was something that the plan required it to be specific to a location where you just couldn't ask for a blanket application because they're asking for, I believe that was, James would be the one that would speak more knowledgeably to that one, but I think that does specify a park location as part of the application.
So if we go forward, we are limited to just that park.
Correct. And again, I think these are pretty competitive grant funds. These are, this pool of grant funding from the DNR is a pretty competitive grant pool. My gut on this one, it's kind of a long shot to get the grant. However, you're not going to know unless you put an application in. And having that bailout point of, if the grant is awarded, we're not required to accept it. We could basically say, we did have a change of plan. We really want to put this in another park. Can we negotiate down the road? Or we can just say, thanks for the award. We just at this point don't have the funding to do it. And that is an option. So we're not, by basically making the application, we're not locked into spending the money. We still have opportunities as this kind of develops. But if we don't do this first grant, approve the resolution for the grant, we can't even make the application.
Kind of get your foot in the door kind of thing?
Correct.
Marta, did you make a motion? I'm sorry.
I have not made a motion.
I don't see why we should continue pursuing it if it's going to be at Lakeside Park and we're locked into that. To be awarded this, which is, it's significant. It's up to $100,000, was it, or something like that?
125, I believe.
But we have to spend another $125,000 to get that. I mean, this is not free money.
But there is a grant acceptance process if should we be awarded the grant that we would have an opportunity to either pass on participation in whole or, continue down the path. I mean, this is...
I understand that, but I don't see that as a path for that park. I don't see that as anywhere near optimum use of our premier park.
The other component that I would add is it sounds like Parks, Lakes, and Trails has also had some private donations or offers of some match monies to help to bridge the gap that the city would pay. Dan, do you have some context there as well?
Yeah, none of these are obviously, guaranteed at this point. There's been some initial conversations, so there's approximately right around another $15,000 for another grant, a quality of life grant for this one. There's been some discussion that a private donor from the the playground supplier knows a private donor who helps fund inclusive playgrounds. Potentially, they looked at an additional $20,000 to $30,000. Again, not guaranteed, but there was some additional funding sources potentially there. And I know Jamie had reached out to the Forest Lake Lions Club to express to see if there's any interest from there. So there was some additional funding that could be on the table if this grant does move forward. And I know one of the reasons why Lakeside Memorial Park was selected was that equipment that's in there is in a state where it needs to get replaced anyway, just because of the frosties and kind of the current state of what that equipment is at. So they kind of looked at if we're going to have to do a playground replacement in that park and they do a grant application, they could kind of get a nicer level playground, more inclusive for the same or potentially less investment that we would have to do if we did it all on our own.
Go ahead, Ed.
I thought we already approved the repair of that existing equipment because Jamie said it was just going to be foundation work.
Yeah,
That was the problem. I thought that was already approved.
I think there has been some improvement to the equipment in there. I think when they kind of saw this opportunity, it was kind of a way if we already were going to put in X amount of dollars, we could basically double the funds to get something that was a long-range kind of idea or kind of a long-range ask for the parks. When they looked at, inclusive playgrounds, this is was something that was on their long-range plan, and it allowed us to kind of, leverage our funds to get to this kind of inclusive playground as well.
I would much rather see it at Fenway Park, and my reasons are that Fenway, with all the athletic activities that park draws, there's families of all types, children of all ages, and maybe you're there to watch your son play a particular sport or daughter play a particular sport, but the little ones don't really want to watch. This might be a great opportunity for them to have something else to do besides just having sports fields there.
So with those options on the table, our only real option tonight to continue those conversations is to approve a grant application, knowing there are still details we can work out. I'd make a motion that we approve the grant application to keep those options on the table, and knowing we have opportunity to have more conversations with Parks, Lakes, and Trails, confirm location, and ultimately, if we chose not to participate, we could at a future point. We still have those options down the road by approving this tonight. So that would be my motion.
Do we have a second on that?
I'll second it.
All right. If we approve this, we're approving it for Lakeside Memorial Park. We're not just approving it. They're not.
But it still gives us some options to say no in the middle of it, too.
But I don't see the sense of doing that. If we're in favor of trying to get this grant, why set it up on a park that you may not want it, and then you lose the grant completely? Why not set it up on a park that we could all agree on?
So I believe it belongs at Lakeside Memorial Park. I think the footprint is about the same as what we're using it today. That equipment if it's an inclusive playground, let's put it in a spot that's going to be as inclusive as possible. That is the premier park. I do support it being there. I appreciate there's some I appreciate not everyone's there yet, and I think there's room to negotiate those things down the road should we have the luxury of being awarded the grant.
See, I think this is more exclusive than inclusive. It's wheelchair accessible, I understand. Nothing over 2 to 3 feet tall. There's very few kids that are going to want to play on it that aren't.
Those platforms went 6 to 8 feet in the air. They were larger platforms, and I think this is where the conversation needs to come back with Parks, Lakes, and Trails on. Explain to us how the fun factor's up for everybody, and that it is indeed an inclusive park. And I was satisfied in some follow-up conversations with Parks, Lakes, and Trails, and I think it'd be great for us to have those conversations with them.
And sadly enough, it's twice the price. That's the other part about it. And there's no reason why, comparable equipment should be twice the price. $250,000 is just crazy for that park.
And the other thing I would like to see is Lakeside Memorial Park to have something for older children, and not even children, but older, teenagers. I mean, I think that would be a much more valuable asset to Lakeside, because those types of people do go down there,
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
You voted aye for it?
No, I'm sorry, no.
All right, let's
do this again.
Really, let's do a
Read the
roll
motion.
call on it.
Councilmember Bain,
Aye.
Councilmember Husnick,
Aye.
Councilmember Eigner,
No.
and Mayor Winnick.
No. All right. So we'll move on to the regular agenda. Donovan, can you take us through 7A?
Sure. Mayor, members of council, I'd like to present this is a subdivision concept plan from Mr. Dave Madison, a longtime resident who's here with us this evening. He owns a property. It's located on Third Lake here.
We don't have anything on the screen yet.
Okay. It's called Third Lake Estates. You can imagine it is on Third Lake. It's a 13-acre parcel. About a little under 5 acres of that is wetland in the rear of the property. Just to give you some idea here, includes this parcel with the existing home on it and the parcel to the rear, There is sewer access to the property, no city water. It's up. Access would be through Irish Avenue and Inman Avenue. The concept plan before you this evening is a total of 10 new lots, and the Plan Commission did review this, and their recommendation is to either make it a PUD and have all the lots 25,000 feet, have it a PUD or have all the lots 25,000 feet or larger and have staff to work on egress and exit into the development. The conversation at the Plan Commission was focused on the roads, both Inman and Irish, and this is 224th here, it's gravel here on 224th, it's paved on Inman, but it's not built to city standards. There's a slope there, there's a narrowness of the street that, Plan Commission found a little problematic, and that thus the motion reflected that. The city itself is somewhat limited as far as requiring the developer to upgrade that road, and evidently there have been some, notions of assessments to improve the road, but none have been successful. What's before you is to look at the plan's acceptability to the comprehensive plan, utility availability, and development regulations. All these lots currently are 25,000 square feet or larger, which is the minimum lot size for the single-family zone property on public sewer. And a wetland delineation has been completed, and that roughly shows that blue line in the rear. And so it looks like none of the development would impact wetlands. Staff is okay with, finds the 50-foot right-of-way acceptable if the utility easement is maintained at 10 feet on each side in width. And also the applicant is looking for some guidance on whether a PUD application would be acceptable if they would make the lots a little bit smaller and basically shift this road southward to give these lots a little more usable territory, less slope, and also perhaps have setbacks so that to have a little more tree preservation. So this time I'm happy to take any questions from council.
Thank you. Do you want to speak in?
Mr. Mayor, City Council, the steep street in question is Irish Avenue.
Irish?
Yeah, Inman is along the boat landing there. Mm-hmm. And so the cul-de-sac dimension would stay the same. If we tipped it down a little bit, we would meet just about all the requirements for the lot, except maybe one or two. But that would take the lots on the north and east side and give them a little more flexibility without tearing out all the trees and a little nicer backyards. So we just bend that cul-de-sac down a little bit. The 50-foot is in regards to where you enter. So, so far everything has come back looking in order with the wetlands, the concept plan, with the Planning Commission. The soil borings were done last week and they came out just fine. So, my intentions are to move forward to the preliminary plat stage and then an approved preliminary plat and proceed from there.
All right. A couple of questions for clarification, and I don't know if Donovan or you, but when I look at this, I see the two stormwater ponds are on two of the smallest lots, and having the one stormwater pond out looks almost like it's right at the edge of the road in front.
Yeah, that is just kind of a concept plan. I don't like that the blue is there. That's just what the CAD did and presented it. Actually, there we go. You can see that there would be a pipe coming underneath the road there for the two lots that face the road, and that retention pond would be up front. And you can see where the house pads would be up on top higher. Okay. And then the other sediment or retention ponds would be behind on the right-hand side there. Actually, hoping to move that retention pond a little closer to the property line
to take out some of the kinks in, you know, the CAD drew it, looks pretty, but we have to enter that common sense factor and maintenance and things to keep in mind to handle that. And the other retention pond that we looked at was on lot,
Up here?
yeah, yep. Yeah, that there is a gentle slope to the wetlands, and so that may be more of just sedimentation, but the watershed was open when we met with them to seeing how it would look once we got the calculations back from the engineer.
I would say, if I could add, the main comment from staff was the attempt on during the preliminary design to reduce the number of ponds to 2 and reduce the number of amount of piping, which of course in the future that would be public facilities and of course require public maintenance, so we want to minimize the amount the city has to maintain.
All right. Any other questions? No, I guess the other clarification was we can't approve a lot change under 25,000 square feet without a PUD?
Correct.
Okay.
So
so the question is, are we happy with it the way it is, or would we prefer a PUD, or as a developer, which way would you prefer?
Well, I always think a little larger lot size, I mean, for saleability is there. And I don't know if they would, to do something, if we played with the dimensions and the functions there, we might be able to still stay within that if we tip that cul-de-sac a little bit. It's also, that's just something that we have to do, but I think it's doable. Otherwise, I mean, that works.
Sure.
Yeah.
But part of it, excuse me, part of it was tree preservation too, wasn't it?
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah, if we can tip a little bit, then, you know, with, you know, the builder that comes in there, you know, with 60-foot pads, that's less trees, and then he can select, you know.
Sure.
Are you able, if you tip that cul-de-sac as suggested, are we able to maintain all city standards for that street? Is that wasn't going to compromise anything around accessibility by safety, emergency equipment, or?
The cul-de-sac would stay the same size to accommodate all of that, and the street.
And the street, so,
Yeah.
and street width stay standard, there's no compromise by just.
Correct, yeah,
we're
and
just changing the trajectory of that street a bit.
Right, and we don't require, for streets of this size, we don't require a sidewalk, so, that makes a difference, I think.
But if we allow that to be tilted, we're not creating a non-conforming lot?
Well, if they were below 24,000 square feet, they would be, non-conforming. So it would have to come under as a PUD application, unless they, changed, some street dimensions and worked with it a little bit more. But you can't during subdivision create a non-conforming lot. I mean, but if there was a planning development and there was recognized benefits, make a better product, a better development, then it's not considered non-conforming. Then it's just part of that process. And they could be smaller than 25,000 is the minimum.
I think the trade-off in a case like that is that you're making some of the other lots bigger, and so that the average square footage stays the same.
Oh, yeah, exactly, yeah.
But the other question I have too, and I know it came up at the Planning Commission, I attended that meeting, and what were the plans for 224th there, Dave? Any changes there at all?
Well, 224th, when the infrastructure came up, it'd be a shape and grade and blacktop, and it would stop at the end of my property. I mean, I have thought myself about the balance of 224th, I don't know if the people down there are interested in jumping on. I mean, it would certainly be a cost savings to them if they were interested in doing the blacktop themselves, from a standpoint that once the first lift went down on mine, they could shape and grade the entire thing down to Inman, and then when the final lift came in, it might make sense then to touch it up and blacktop it all. But by the city standards, I'm only required to bring it there to the top of the hill to edge my property line.
Mr. Mayor, I have one question for Ryan. Did you want to weigh in on this, please, and help me out a little bit?
Sure. So basically what we're seeing tonight is just purely a concept laying out their subdivision. No full engineering review has been done at this point. You know, haven't really put much into that as well. So somewhat the city saw this concept maybe late 80s, early 90s. So the sewer is been extended up the hillside to this property just slightly east of the proposed plat. So we'll tie into gravity sewer. No lift stations will be required with the project. Obviously no water exists out here. So basically what I've commented on to date is, you know, we'll have to, you know, obviously do some work on 224th because we'll be extending sewer and utilities there. We'll extend the utilities to the edge of their plats, and also they'll be responsible for the road improvements to the edge of their plats. And then the cul-de-sac as shown would be required to meet city standards and a full road section with curb and gutter. Preliminary comments that have been included to date is there's just too much infrastructure proposed with the storm sewer. We need to minimize that. Right now you got a road with short cul-de-sac with 3 low points. So playing with grades and stuff like that, we can hopefully at least bring the water to 2 points. So, you know, in time our maintenance is lower than what would be proposed here. And then also where those storm sewer does cut through the yards, we will require water drainage utility easements. So you don't want to be cutting through multiple yards with that. And then private utilities will go in as required per the development agreement as traditional subdivisions within the drainage utility easements. And that's kind of really where we're at this point. So if they get concept approval tonight, then I'm assuming their engineer will work on some additional plans and submit those for a review. And then we'll get into the elevations, materials, and widths.
That helps.
The length of the cul-de-sac isn't a concern for the city?
No, Chief Newman did review it and found acceptable length.
Okay. And I guess the other discussion I was looking at was Irish itself. And, you know, I don't think it's your responsibility at this point, but if that is a city street, we need to look at improving that to some degree anyway.
Right.
But, yeah, is any other questions? Now to look for a motion.
Well, there's not a motion required. It's simply just feedback. It's non-binding. It's just simply helping the applicant get the best application to come forward for preliminary plat review.
Looks good to me. I mean, just,
Yeah.
you know, the few concerns
Okay.
that are so far. So your option as to how you want to proceed with.
Yeah, I'll move forward with it. All right, thank you for your time.
Yeah, and take care of the recommendation from our engineer too. I mean, he's.
Right, oh, absolutely, yeah.
You know, so, all right.
All right, Dan, 7B, council appointment process.
Billy. Mayor, members of the council, during the March 12th meeting, the city council, we set the April 2nd as the date to hold the special council meeting where the replacement member for the seat vacated by Councilmember Freer will be appointed. We opened at that point as well as the application period for residents who are interested in applying for the position. That application period actually closed today at 4:30. And when it was open, we received a total of 13 applications from residents who are interested in applying for or being a member of the city council. And you had that list in front of you, on your screens in front of you, the list of the 13 who have applied. Basically, what we're asking for tonight is an outline of what the meeting will look like on the 2nd. There's a kind of a bunch of different options for what the appointment process can look like. When I look back at how other cities have handled this and how we've done this in the past, the format has typically been candidates who have applied, who are interested, come forward at the special meeting, are asked a kind of an interview style questions from the council. The one recommendation I have is that they're all asked the same set of questions. So you're not asking different questions of different candidates. So the same questions are asked of all the candidates. I do have in your packet, and it's actually now on the screen here, just 5 sample questions that I was able to find and reference that are potential questions that you could use for the interview portion of the special meeting. The final thing I have on here is just kind of the overall format of the meeting, and one thing I suggested was the first and foremost, we call the meeting to order. Just kind of a quick overview of the process, so everybody in the room kind of knows what to expect during the process. The next stage would then be to go through the actual interview of the candidates that would be led by the council. After the candidate interviews are completed, just do a kind of a 5-minute recess to kind of break from that interview section back into the deliberation section. When the meeting is reconvened, the council will then deliberate and consider the candidates, and then that's when the motions will be made by the council to figure out which candidate would be appointed, and the candidates would be voted upon, and then and just confirm with Bridget that the first candidate to receive a majority vote would then be appointed to the council, correct?
Correct.
And then if in the instance that there was no candidate that was able to receive a majority vote, the mayor then reserves the right to appoint the replacement for the vacated seat. Again, staff at this point is just looking for are you okay with this, what the format's presented here? Do you want something specifically different for it? Just kind of looking for what process you want to use for the appointment on the April 2nd meeting.
Thank you, Dan. I think the layout looks pretty good. I don't like question number 4. I think it's a little childish to ask, what do you think a city council person does?
I agree with you.
So let's strike that.
Agree. I was I was thinking, time blocking this in my head while I was looking at the number of candidates, and given we have 13 candidates, perhaps for reasons to expedite answers, looking for opportunities to narrow perhaps. So number 1, instead of 3 reasons you're interested in serving, a primary, and then in number 2, so what is your primary reason for serving, and then to get to 1, and then in question number 2, what issues do you see as critical in the city of Forest Lake, which is more of a short-term issue, maybe to say what is the top issue in 2018, again to get to like a concise answer, and then because number 3 we allow for a longer-term vision question, so you're able to balance both short-term and long-term, and that might help to have again, this potentially could be a long evening, which I'm happy to entertain. Just an idea to.
Well, I think with 13 applicants right now, we'll probably see a few bow out just at the time, potentially anyway. It's nice to see so many people actually take an active interest in this. Any other, I guess the other thing would be just for fairness, who we call first or last, but, possibly just random drawing of their names. But
Yeah, we'll do the same way we do when we do actually the candidates for the ballots. I mean, we literally cut the names in a hat and put them in a hat and draw them out one by one from a hat. So we'll go through that same process for this. So it will be a completely random selection as to who goes first and who goes last on the interview. So we'll make sure we randomize that. The last question I have is just the time. You guys want that meeting? Typically, council meetings are at 7. I just want to make sure you want to do 7, or do you want to go earlier, or what do you guys want for the time for that meeting?
Well, 7 o'clock works the best for me. That's all. I'm just one person.
I'm okay with 7. I think it'll go quicker than.
I'm okay with 7.
We'll give them extra points for short answers.
And just as a point of clarification on the actual applications that were sent out, a few of you may have noticed some formatting issues. That was due to the way the fillable form was presented. It's not on the candidates themselves. That was actually on the way it was formatted when I created the form. So don't hold that against any of the candidates. That was actually a staff. And it worked fine on my computer, but I learned different browsers render that differently. So that was the reason that's there. So if you see that, that was strictly on me.
Okay.
I do have 2 clarifying questions. So the voting process, is it any council member makes a motion, or is this like a typical filling a vacancy where the mayor would make an initial appointment and then there's a vote, or make an initial motion and there's a vote? Was that clear?
Council appoints.
Is it council, any member of council makes the initial motion, or typically when we're filling a vacancy, the mayor makes the first motion and then it's seconded and then a vote?
Mayor, members of the council, so what you're referring to, I think, is the commission appointment process.
Yes.
And that's a little bit different process. This one, any member of the council can make a motion to appoint any particular applicant.
And then effective, is the vacancy filled upon vote and that member becomes a member at that point, or is that effective at a later date?
Mayor, members of the council, what would have to happen is there needs to be an oath of office administered. So that's a decision for the council as well. That could be administered at that meeting following appointment. It could be administered at a special meeting or the next council meeting. Is whatever the council would like to do as far as getting that position filled.
To me, it would make sense to have it done that night, because then they would have the packet for the next meeting and all of it, so that's the way I feel about it.
Is there any, anything we need to assure verification that they can be appointed? I mean, it's the same thing as applying for candidacy, but has that been done through the initial application, or does the city staff have to do something for that?
We did vet the applications prior to putting them online to make sure that they were residents and they met the requirements. So any candidate that was on here has gone through the initial vetting process. So the information that we have was verified with what we can do. And we didn't do an exhaustive background check on every application, but we did verify, the candidates were eligible before posting them online.
All right.
Clarification of effective? Do we make that decision tonight? Do we just
Clarification
of when that position would be effective?
Oh,
I think it would be April
as
9th.
soon as they're voted, I mean,
That night.
it would be, yeah, I would think so anyway.
That's why I was asking for to have him sworn in that night on the 2nd, then he'd be eligible to vote on the 9th. He or she.
They would, no matter which option, they would be eligible on the 9th because the swearing in would take place as the first item of business on the
So then it doesn't.
agenda.
Okay.
The only reason why we want to move it tonight is if whoever's appointed wants their family there to witness it, and they may not be at the interview process, just for, to get to pictures and stuff like that. So that's why we left it open, so they have that ability to, take some pictures or whatever they decided to do.
That's good. All right. Go ahead.
I do have one other question. The examples of these questions, when we have the formal questions, will they be available to the candidates? Obviously, these are available ahead of time.
I think that's kind of the questions we're going to use so that they can prepare a little bit.
That's my assumption so we've asked them a set of questions as part of the application, and then this is the interview. These would be the interview questions.
Yeah,
That's my assumption.
that's what I'm assuming. We'll just use those.
Okay.
Just striking that first part of number 4.
Right.
All right. You got enough to go on,
I
Dan?
think I got enough. I'll get the agenda out, and I'll also create score or interview sheets with all the questions on them for all the candidates. So all the members of the council will have ability to take notes during the actual interview process. So we'll have all those pre-filled out for everyone.
All right. So we'll go on to the airport lease extension.
Good evening. I'm Christopher Olson with Northern Plains Aviation. We currently have a commercial lease that's out there and then a private lease as well. We're looking for 3 things here tonight that really are, we'd love it if we could get it done tonight, but I don't know if that's possible. But in concept, we'd like if everybody could agree to help us along with this process. First, we need our lease term to be longer and something that's more viable for what we have going on out there. Most of the commercial lease terms that are around the cities and things are quite a bit longer than what we have, and they are a little more versatile. Second thing we'd like is we need to expand the Spot 1 boundaries because we actually have 3 buildings we need to put up there, and that also we just need to stretch that spot so that it's bigger and that it fits. And the third thing, we need somebody that we can negotiate directly with to try and get that lease hammered out so that it's something that you actually have something to vote on. Right now, I just threw softballs out, and it's kind of up in the air every time we come back and forth. There's really nothing solid that's coming back. And the current lease that we have, we did sign that just to be a placeholder, but it's not viable to actually build a business on. You couldn't do it. It's wide open, and it doesn't address the company's needs.
All right. Thank you. I know we had a little discussion at the workshop about it, brought that up. The lease is something we've dealt with a lot on the private hangar side already. I I want to be flexible, I want to help out, but the length of the lease span is something that I can't see going, 100-year, 200-year. We have 25-year leases, which compared to a lot of airports is longer than they have. And so I don't know if that's going to be a deal breaker right up front, but to be real honest, I just can't see committing the city. It's nothing you do, but I mean, if we commit to a 100-year lease, we don't know what MnDOT's going to do. We don't know what anything else is going to happen with. I mean, we're putting a lot of financial burden on the future Forest Lake City, and I just can't commit to something like that.
We're willing to negotiate that term down to something that's viable. I mean, we had to start somewhere. We've seen some pretty long leases. I can give you some. I mean, there's lots of examples out there. I think the lease that they attached to your packet, it was a very poor example. There's some leases that go 40, 50 years. They're increments of every 10 years. They're re-upped several times, so they might be 30 years. They're a 10-year lease with re-ups, so that if I wanted to come back and renegotiate after 10 years, I could do that. Or, let's say after the 30 years is up, I by all means could keep going, but I'd have to negotiate with you. So there's other options there, but what we have here is 25 years. It's an open-ended deal. It's not tied to any financial markets at all. There's nothing. It's just an open-ended, bill the crap out of them deal. So that's probably not going to work. So, we're just looking in concept. I mean, I think we've tossed around possibly a 40-year deal, or maybe we could do a 20 to start with 2 re-ups at 10, so that's renegotiable. There's a lot of ways to do that, but I do need somebody that can sit down, possibly your attorney, and I think we could come up with a concept that you guys would be proud to vote on. Right now, I mean, it's kind of up in the air to where we're just throwing softballs back and forth, and like I said, that's just kind of chit-chat back and forth with emails, and there's really nobody that's been able to give me solid answers on that lease.
Well, it's the council that'll give you the solid answer, not our attorney or our administrator, but it's the council here that can do that. And, we definitely want to work with businesses, with, people out there. We've got basically the rest of the lots are leased out and full now. So it would be nice to see some commercial come in there. But really, I guess I would like to see from you what, on paper, here's what we want. Here's what we need to go forward. We spent an awful lot of money out there. We spent a lot more than what we wanted to. We're involved in lawsuits on it right now. I don't think there's a lot of desire on the council to commit the city to a lot more than what we have right now. And honestly, a blank lot versus a 100-year lease, we're probably going to come out better on the blank lot. Just, we've gotten burned on that airport so much right now. So we definitely, as far as I'm looking at it, would like to work with you. But, if it's a 25-year lease with an option to extend it, that might be something we can look at. That's, what, everybody else has a 25-year lease, and when that comes up, obviously those are going to get extended. We're not shutting it down, as long as MnDOT continues their participation in it as well. If MnDOT doesn't continue their participation, there's no way we as a city can financially maintain that. We can't spend another $1 million or $2 million on redoing a runway 25 years from now, things like that. So I would like to see what you're asking for on paper. I haven't seen that yet. And
we did. We attached an addendum and sent it back to Dan, and we've gone back and forth. And
about a 100-year lease or a 200-year lease.
The 100-year lease, as we've discussed, actually it went to 75 on that, and that was just a softball. Like, give me something to go back on, and there's nobody to, what would you like to see? I mean, this is supposed to be a marriage.
25 years is where I'm solid. I don't know if anybody else wants to.
Where are we with? Oh, I'd like to see it longer because of the fact it's a commercial business and it's a very expensive building you're planning on putting up. And as far as extending those lots there, that would all be pending on Silas's work with MnDOT, as you well know. But I don't know. 30 or 40-year lease something you could live with? I mean, that's
Yeah,
kinda-
I mean, yeah, absolutely. And like I said, we could do a 20 with 2 re-ups of 10, or a 20 with I mean, we can negotiate them. These are pretty standard leases around the cities. The problem with the lease, like I said, that we have, it's 25 years. With airports, you're going to make an extension or make a length of the lease proportionate to the kind of building you want. If you want us to build a $4.5 million project, you're going to want to give us some time to be able to pay ourselves back for that. If you want us to put up 10 sheds, I mean, you can shorten those babies up and we can put up some pretty ugly buildings that'll meet the code. But we would like to put up a really nice building that's something that people want to come see.
I think one of the things we're struggling with here is a round peg fitting into a square hole, and I think we need to ask if we're open to considering a commercial lease at the airport, and really what would the terms of a commercial lease be? And I could really use some more information at some point from staff, our city attorney, on what would that look like, because I feel like, so right now we're having a conversation on lease terms, but I think ultimately for this relationship to be successful on both sides, we're both probably going to want some different language in there. And I kind of look at this as using a residential lease for a commercial business, and I feel like there's terms that we would want to have different, and that's probably different than the structure we have today.
There's already 2 commercial leases out there. They're on 25-year leases, but as far as the amount per square foot and all that is...
But we're talking about a different scale, and there's a time when there is a small business that might fit, but I think we're going to find things over time where we would have wished both of us would have wished we had different terms, and I would just hope we would address that sooner rather than
I guess,
trying to change
I guess
something.
what I would say is if we're going to go a day over 25 years, it would have to be completely contingent upon MnDOT's support of our airport, at least at the current financial rate of 80%, if not higher. So it would be contingent upon MnDOT's continuation. I don't know if that will affect you or if you would find that acceptable, but they're the majority of the financial support for the airport. So I don't want to leave the rest of the city of Forest Lake financially liable for that long-term.
So when we build the lease out, the lease just allows us to operate with what we have at the airport at the time. So that lease goes, I mean, it actually doesn't require any performance from you other than that we get that spot. We're hoping that all takes off and that we can support you enough to bring enough business in to keep that rolling. And we hope that everybody here on this council and the other council can make that airport compliant so that MnDOT does stick around. Those are the 2 big things. But if the next day somebody came in and bulldozed the airport because MnDOT left, our lease, we could still keep a building there, but there's no runway. There's not a whole lot we can do about that. It doesn't really have a performance guarantee on your side. It really just allows us to keep our spot so that we can operate long enough and put that kind of investment into a building.
It sounds simple enough. Unfortunately, there's always assumptions made. If you're leasing a piece of property from us at an airport and it ceases becoming an airport, I do believe that we may end up having some financial liability. I don't see the airport ceasing operation, but stranger things have happened, and that's why, if MnDOT for some reason discontinues funding us, I can't see where we can afford to maintain that any longer than our current lease commitments are. And I do believe we would, commit or maintain those as long out as they are. So if you signed a 25-year, we would be bound to do that, but it could be a very expensive proposition at 40 or 50 years without their commitment as well. And that's why I find, if I wanted to support it, I do want to support it. I want to see you guys come in there. I want to make this work, but it has to be contingent upon their financial support. Because otherwise, the liability to the city is just too high for me to commit to. What did you have?
I think you bring up one point. I think what I'm interested in is what I don't know about commercial leases, and are there other considerations that we would want to make as well to enter into as part of a commercial lease with a transaction of this type? You bring up one element, and that's a good element, and I don't know what I don't know. I would like to see some more feedback from staff on what those typical provisions would be if we were to have a commercial lease as well.
And just 2 points of clarification on that. We did reach out to neighboring airports and ask for their leases to see, looking at it just from the lens of term, to see where are we in terms of the scope of term. We did that after the workshop last Monday, so the ask went, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday last week. From them until now, we've only heard back from 2. I'm assuming we'll get the rest of them will come in, but it just is a timing issue. Cambridge, their term was 10 years is what they do for their commercial leases. They do offer, you can renegotiate, I think, first right of refusal at the end of your 10-year term. We did get Buffalo's lease. They don't differentiate. They're kind of like us. They don't do a straight commercial or a straight residence or a straight quote-unquote residential lease. They have one lease kind of similar to what we do, and their term is actually 30 years. So we're kind of, we're not off the spectrum by being at 25 years at this point. I think, however, if you were to go, say, 40, 50, I think would be kind of off, that would be on the edge of the bell curve in terms of average lease terms. With Cambridge, there are operations that potentially work at Cambridge on 10 years. So, I think you could make the operation work at 25 years. I'm not saying that it's impossible that there is an option on 25 years because other airports have been able to figure out commercial leases without extremely long terms. Another point of just kind of existing in leases that we've had with long terms and what some of the unintended consequences of that are. We do have a couple of antenna leases that were signed probably back in the mid-90s that were on some of our water towers that were at that time were in use, and we envision they would still be in use, for basically at that point forever. We don't use those towers anymore, but yet we still have to maintain them because there's equipment on there that we're trying to. So we're still kind of in that. We signed a long-range lease on there thinking everything was going to stay status quo. Something changed in those 25 years, and now we're still stuck maintaining equipment. And again, not saying this would happen here, but just as one of those things in the back of my mind. So we do have some cases of that in the city right now where we have cell phone tower leases that are out on equipment that we can't take that tower down because we have to maintain the structure per the lease that we have. So there is that unintended consequences can come up down the road. So it's something to be considered if you're looking at doing a significant long-term lease extension past the 20
If we have to
years.
paint that tower, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it won't even come close to the...
We have to make, in terms of the revenues coming in on that. And again, I just say that as just kind of a tale. We actually have a couple of situations, and just something to kind of keep in the back of your mind as you're considering this.
There's a big difference between a water tower and a piece of land, though.
If I could touch on that quick, Cambridge and Buffalo have very different circumstances. They're out kind of in the middle of nowhere, and if you go up to Cambridge, you'll find that a lot of the buildings that are there are those $10 tear-down Menard buildings. If you want to put a Grand Poobah up here in Forest Lake to represent your city, you're going to need to, make it functional for us. I understand, Dan, about the cell tower and stuff, but we don't do cell towers, we do hangars, and we're trying to make this thing go with airplanes. It's capital intensive, it's extremely expensive, and there's just no way with the lease, the way it's written, without some kind of extension that's on there. We could go with the 25, but give me another 10, or give me 3 10s or 4 10s. And we could renegotiate that way. I'm happy to do that, and we're very negotiable. We just need somebody that we can deal with to bounce ideas off that we think that you would all like. So far, we keep getting referred back and forth to the 2 councils, and all my hair is going to fall out before that's all done. So we're gonna need.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I know it's looking good on you. So now, that's kind of where we're at. We need some direction here from you guys. We need some help because right now, we've been working on this for 6 months and we're really no further along. We can't even talk about infrastructure or water, sewer, and electric, or who's going to do the pad. We can't even deal with it because the lease that we have is not, you can't build anything on it.
So you bring up infrastructure, and that's the other part. I'm highly uncomfortable with us I appreciate the lease term is your biggest need right now, but I'm highly uncomfortable with us extending that lease term and entering into that marriage without knowing what you need down the road. And I just think the infrastructure plan really needs to have been thoroughly vetted through airport engineering. I want to hear the airport commission weigh in on it, that fits with their long-term plans. And I think we need to have kind of the same sheet of paper presented to both parties for infrastructure, so we're on the same page of ultimately what you need. Again, I appreciate that your timeline for the lease term is important right now, but again, I don't want us to get engaged and sign this lease term and find out that we are on different planets when it comes to the infrastructure to support it. You are talking about a big investment, and I would hope we can kind of package those things together. So
The main building he's talking about wouldn't need an infrastructure extension. He could actually hook up to the end of that line, but we're just tapping into it.
Right.
Beyond that, it would require some kind of a main extension on anything to the north there. And I would hope that someday, my hope would be that would end up being hangars in there, beyond what he wants to do. And of course, that's something we need to talk about later on down the road, part of the CIP, but the building that they want to put up right now would be serviced by what's already there. So,
Yeah, we're actually, I mean, it really is kind of a win for you guys. We're willing to pay for the space that we need for all the buildings, but we're putting up the one. The other building, if we put it up, has already got service. So we're going to pay for all that space, and it could be years before we can actually get a service line, a 6-inch or an 8-inch, pipeline that runs down there with the water and sewer. But we're willing to do that right now to try and get our main building up. So right now what we need, I don't know, John's probably better at this stuff, but the actual, I think you need a 2 or a 3-inch water line and a 4-inch sewer pipe that runs down, and it's really nominal, to be honest with you. We don't have to do anything with the existing service lines.
All right.
Can I just make one point of clarification on kind of project and, because I've been working a lot with the applicant on this process and kind of getting it through, and it's been a kind of a moving target, as it's evolved and as most projects are, as they come through in infancy and they kind of evolve and they turn into something a little bit different as you kind of go through the process. So again, just focusing on lot 1, which is the lot that's next to the arrival departure building. I don't have the exact specs. It's in the lease packet of the exact specs of it. Basically, if you boil it down, there is an opportunity for the applicant to put a building on lot 1 as it sits today. I mean, there is that ability right now. So given the lease terms that are there, given the lot size that's there, given the infrastructure proximity to where the lot is, it's all feasible. What's being asked at this point is, by doing that, it kind of blocks his future expansion of what he wants the project to be down the road. So what's being asked is basically for the city to look at redesigning lot 1 to better fit how he wants his airplane or his hangar to be laid out, in sequence. That again is kind of triggering potentially some airport layout plan changes, which are now at MnDOT, just a kind of, again, a cut review. Basically, we're trying to take them to the point where we'll say, this is possible, here's the engineering fees to get it there, but again, end of the day, this project, one phase of it could happen with a set of building plans. I mean, I just want that to be kind of, he has a lease, he has a lot. Again, we're just trying to get him to make the lot fit his bigger vision, so we don't have to kind of come back and redesign in 2 or 3 years when he's ready to do that second and third building. And the layout does change. The building he wants to build, he does need a lot changed to get it to sequence where he wants the buildings laid out. However, that being said, there is sufficient space on lot 1 to put a building on and to put infrastructure in, and there is a current lease in place. What's being asked of us with this project is to basically kind of get it to that next level, so he's basically teed up to do the expansion in, say, 2, 3, 4 years as the business grows. So again, in kind of summary, is that a fair assessment, Chris?
It's a fair assessment. The only thing I'd add to that is that first spot was a placeholder, and before Dan was kind of involved with us, we were working with other folks that aren't here now. They kind of asked us, what do you want it to look like? And we weren't sure yet. We hadn't talked to our engineers. The way that thing's laid out, it's about 80 deep by 120 long. Engineering wise, it adds a lot of steel to make that span. A lot. It's a lot of steel. It's big doors. I mean, it's structurally, it adds an enormous cost to that building that really is unnecessary. It also doesn't fit aircraft as well as the other way we're going to do it. If we do it facing the runway, if you had an 80-foot with a 60-foot door, and then you went back 120 feet, you could tuck all the airplanes back so you could pull them out one at a time. So there's a lot of thinking going in this when you start parking airplanes so you don't ding wings, and it gets real expensive when you start banging stuff up. So the other thing is, you know, every space that you go down, when you put a span like that, you're losing hangar space. So if we put a building in like that, you know, and then you start putting spaces in between the buildings, you're just losing buildings down the end of the row. And that's also not necessary. If we built them back the long way, down the road for you guys, you can put a lot more buildings in there. That's a lot more revenue.
All right.
So the basic thing right now is the lease thing. That's really what we're.
We just, if we can get the
Because if we
lease.
can't get past that, there's no sense going any further.
Yeah, there's no sense in even talking about
Right.
anything else. If we can just get this lease sorted out, I think we could make something that's really something that you guys could be proud of, that we could sort of marry to the private lease as well. So if you move those together, that might help stop a lot of the problems out there. Get that thing sorted out, then we can move on with the infrastructure of tapping 2 lines, figure out who's going to do dirt, and come back and do that later.
A couple of questions for you.
Sure.
Being it's commercial, how many takeoffs, landings a day do you think are?
So that's a good question. So when we say flight school, everybody freaks out and thinks we're going to have Air America come in here. The runway, even if we expanded it, is too short. I've been doing some instruction out there recently. We'll take off out of there and either go over to Anoka or go up to Rush City with the longer runway. You don't take new students and do bounces on short runways like that. They'll be in the ditch, before too long. So that's really a destination airport. It's either a takeoff or a landing airport, generally. You can do some landings and stuff, but it's more for an experienced pilot. I don't think that you're going to see a whole lot of difference. I don't care if you put tons of hangars out there. It's kind of a sunny day airport. There's no approaches in there. You're going to have to go somewhere else. So you're never going to see the traffic out of it that you will somewhere else. It could be a great destination airport, though. We got a golf course that's a mile south and a great town up here to the north. I think it's excellent.
Well, I would definitely look at an extension to the lease contingent upon MnDOT. But without that approval, without that contingency, I just can't see the city committing to anything longer than what.
We could agree to that, because if MnDOT pulls out and you can't support the airport, my lease is worthless anyways. So it wouldn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
Unless somebody privately bought it, but that's a different story.
Go ahead, Bridget.
Thanks. Your Honor, if there is appetite on the council to look at a potential longer lease term, I can say we do represent the city of South St. Paul. They have an airport there, so we have significant experience in kind of the lease drafting area. I'd be happy if council gives direction to kind of prepare a red line of the existing lease that might address some of the concerns that the council's been raising with respect to the long-term lease, and what are some of the changes that might need to be made if we're going to have this be a 30 or 40-year lease, to ensure that the city's that all of these longer term issues are addressed. So if that's council direction, it's something I could certainly work on and bring it back to a work session.
I mean, would you be okay with a 10-year?
I just talked to that's Fleming you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just talked to what's his name?
Airport manager.
Joe. I just talked to him today, and yeah, we had some great discussion about it. They go on 10-year leases that are two re-ups, so they go to 30 years. So at the end of 10 years, if I don't like the lease, I can come back and try and negotiate with you. If I like the lease, I can continue with it. But yeah, it's addressed with a lot of things. They do have it tied to a financial market. It's a pretty good lease, so I've talked to them, and we'd love to go down that road.
Well, I guess I'd like to get everybody else's thought on that if we want to look at redoing the lease significantly. I mean, I'd like to tie it to MnDOT support at least at an 80 or possibly higher level for any future costs associated with that. But beyond that, I don't really see need to change any of the other, or too much of the other wording, let's put it that way, on the lease.
Well, once it gets unsupported, unless it goes private, if you don't support it, they paint big X's on it, and it goes away anyways. There's dead airports all over the place.
I guess my ask to you is to look at that lease very closely, and if that's all you need are terms, then let's talk about it. But if there's other things down the road, if we're cracking it open, let's crack it open now so that it works for a period of time.
I think she hit the nail on the head there. I mean, their leases are fairly well seasoned, and they've had them for a long time. Whip Air is down there, Lysdale Flight Service. I talked to both of them today. I got a hold of about 15 people on my cell phone that all knew about leases. And so these are pretty standard items. They're not really, they don't need to be tied to MnDOT, but you could put a clause in there. I mean, it won't make any difference. If the airport closes, it's closed. So,
You see, even with our leases, it's a 25-year lease with a 5-year re-up option at the end too, so, you know, it's there. I mean, but it is a big investment. It's a big deal, and it's a big risk, no doubt about it.
No.
I guess my other comment is I don't want to do this to the Airport Commission. I want to do this with the Airport Commission, and so I know that the lease is our City Council responsibility, but I think it deserves some conversation at the next Airport Commission meeting. Vetting, let's go through that. Let's have that conversation. It's been such a it's been a tough subject, so let's. I'd rather us do it in partnership rather than alone.
I agree. That's good. Dan, do we need to collect any type of financial retainer to start doing the lease?
Yeah, I would recommend if it's specific to this project, you know, if the lease terms are going to be specific to this project, that the billback happens to the applicant versus if we're going to do a general for the full lease term in general, I think that's maybe up to, but if we're looking at specifically just extending for one applicant.
There's a real issue out there with two different leases, and it really needs to be addressed, and if this would help bring that to a head and get everybody on the same path, that really does make sense.
yeah, I think if we do this right, I mean, you could basically take the commercial portions out of it and make it a private lease, and it would tie everything up to where there's I mean, you know, even South St. Paul, they have, everybody does it a little bit differently, but they have a schedule that they go on, so they can give you your lease and tell you what you're going to pay for 10 years. If you like it, you continue. If they're paying too much, it goes down. What I proposed in my thing didn't go down. I set it up more like a fixed annuity. So it was, I mean, like I said, there's, well, we can show it to you. It's fine.
Sam, is it your expectation that all of the leases then get redone? Is that?
I'd love to see that,
Well,
because
but-
there's two separate things there, and it's just, it should have never happened in the first place.
Leases evolve as, you know, as items
An
come up.
ability to redo those leases. I think it's a go-forward basis. It's an evolution, is my perspective. To set an expectation that we reset every lease out there, it opens up a
Yeah,
host
I
of
wouldn't support
negotiation
that.
challenges that are going to be problematic.
This is a commercial lease with specific needs, and so, you know, this is I think 95% of it is going to stay the same as the provisions in our current lease, just addressing that time span and tying that to MnDOT.
Yeah,
support.
there was the things that we had in our addendum were minor issues, like if we could park a firebox outside, you know, so we don't have tons of flammable liquids inside the building. It would match the building. There were minor issues. The sublease, it's a complicated business. If I start a flight school, I'm not going to have it named the same company. It's going to be a different company. Our finance company will be a different, they'll all be mine, but they're going to be under the same thing, leasing back because of liability issues with aircraft. Somebody comes in and crashes, they start suing everybody, and you have to not wipe out your entire business under one name. So that's it. They're fairly, your legal team could probably brush that up in a pretty quick minute.
I'd be interested in City Attorney's recommendation on structure. So if we are going to entertain some new terms, is that a completely different lease that we now have two lease options available, or if we continue on with an amended one version? I think you'd probably find some pros and cons of that we should think about, and I would be interested in recommendation and some things that we should think about as council in making that policy decision. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, in the business world, I mean, if you lease, every lease is a little different, you know, and it's negotiated to that specific spot. I don't see where we have to stick with one lease fits all. I mean, if we can try and accommodate something.
I think the question is also, though, after this point, do we now have two lease options where you can have a commercial lease or our standard lease as we have today, or if we continue to have one lease option for future applicants?
But I don't know that I'd make every hangar out there a business. I mean,
No, that's
certainly.
not the idea. It never should, that's
Correct.
certain areas it should not.
Yeah, but
Any
as far as our lease is concerned, there's nothing, we're not doing anything weird. So it should be a fairly standard lease. It'd be similar to South St. Paul or, there's other airports that have similar leases that are done pretty well. So I don't see any gotchas there. It's just not the one that we have. That's it.
Okay. So as we do move forward, though, there is a bill-back procedure that staff will update you on then for our attorney's time to redo the lease.
Okay?
All right. So does that require a motion?
No, I think that's enough direction for staff to go on.
Okay. All right.
Good?
All right. Ed,
Yeah, one other question we didn't talk about is, this is a commercial business, and I assume you'll have employees.
Well, probably not at first. We may, but it's not, we're not a Burger King. We don't have that kind of traffic. I think that's probably where you're going with this.
No, I was just curious as to a very large building like that, what's all going in it besides airplanes? Or
It's going to be airplanes. You're going to have airplanes. It's a hangar. We're going to have a lot of airplanes in there.
but they'll be for maintenance, for...
We'll have some maintenance and some things like that in there, yeah. Some financial services will be listed in the building, and we'll have a conference room, but I highly doubt that the people in finance will even show up. These days, everything's done. They could do it in their pajamas at home. So they may, if they need to meet you, they'll come to the office, but generally, we won't have a lot of traffic there. We'd prefer not to, actually. The less traffic inside that hangar, the better. So,
I would assume a lot of the traffic's going to come from the airport side.
yeah, most of it's going to come airplanes that are going to come in and out, and what we're doing, and it'll have a very large door and plenty of parking for ourselves. We don't have any additional real needs. We just need to put the building up. We can address that later.
Sure.
Was your concern parking, or were you heading down a different path with?
I'm sorry?
Ed, was your concern parking, or were you heading down a different path?
For me?
Yeah, of asking about employees.
No, a couple things, yeah. I was, A, will it create any jobs? B,
Okay.
parking will be an issue if you have employees, you have to park. So that's where I was going.
When we get to the full expansion, there should be, aviation pays pretty well when you get stuff going. You get maintenance and painting and avionics and things like that. There should be some financial jobs, brokerage, stuff like that. There should be some good jobs that come in there. There's everything from, the low level where you get started too. I mean, when you go to get your mechanic's license, you got to spend a lot of time working with somebody else.
So in the future, as you grow the business, does your plan call for parking? Is there room on that lot, or?
Oh, yeah, there's plenty of room behind it. I don't know that it's going to be, I would wait to see what that need really is before I really address it, because at this point,
But just,
probably won't be a lot of auto traffic. As they grow, as these businesses grow, yeah, you could see 20, 30 employees out there, but I mean, we'll deal with that when it's 20, 30 employees. Right now, we're trying to get one building up.
So I guess, as we go forward, a couple other concerns I think are worth asking. I probably know the answer, but any type of private jets, you wouldn't plan on bringing anything like that?
That's way too short. What you see out there right now is really what you're going to get.
So you'd be okay with something in the lease banning?
You don't
Well,
you don't need it, they're not coming.
Yeah, you don't. Not only do you not have to, but we're not going to be set up for that. There's just no way. Even if you expand the lease, I think you can go to 3,000 feet with it.
Yeah, the new Cirrus jets, I think, can land on shorter than that. So.
Yeah, but I've been flying private jets for 20 years, and I'm telling you, you will not get me landed on that airport. That is way too short. And 10 miles you can go to a fully serviced airport with de-ice equipment, full service, hangars. Lynx Aviation's over there. They have big hangars to put it in at night. We are not going to be capable of dealing with that kind of traffic.
I know that was in the capital improvement plan, was to put jet fuel wasn't it?
Well, yeah,
No,
but
but
that
that's
was-
for a different reason.
But there's a lot of airplanes that burn jet aviation fuel that are props. They're not jets.
Yeah, like they make the Diamond
You don't-
series aircraft. It's actually, it uses jet fuel. It's a diesel engine. That's getting quite popular. It's more efficient, but they use Jet A. It's the same thing as diesel fuel.
But like the Caravan and Beavers
Yeah.
and all that, they're running turbine engines and they sound exactly like a propeller airplane when they take off. They're no different.
So that was going to be the other question I had was, since you're looking at doing maintenance, other things there, my concern would be the noise for the residents around the airport. You know, it's different if you have a plane taking off and leaving, or if you got somebody sitting there on the ground running that motor for an hour. And is that going to be part of this too, is maintenance? So
Well, they generally,
concerns
I've
with
never seen
sound,
it.
I would be.
When you run these airplanes, it costs a lot of money. They don't run them any longer than they have to, and you can't run them up to full power. The stuff that you hear on takeoff, you can't sit there with them all wound up. The brakes won't hold them. You'll end up in somebody's hangar. So it's a little different situation with propeller-driven aircraft. I was just flying the 180. Whoops, sorry. I was just flying the 180 the other day, and we were trying to see if we could hold it. And we pushed the throttle, and there's no way. It just takes off on you. You can't hold that back. There's just no way. So
Okay.
they're running about half throttle when they do maintenance stuff on them. It's
All right.
not very loud.
Go ahead.
Not that I want to be the bearer of a bad news kind of thing, but what if your business fails and you've got this huge building out there?
That's why we separated it. But our first rendition of the building was about, it was like 30,000 square feet. We separated the buildings so that they are, and we discussed it with the airport commission. So our first version was it would have took up that whole spot with one building. We separated them by 3 buildings. That way, if that did ever happen, they were still saleable. An 80 by 80 isn't much bigger than the 60 by 60 that's out there. The 80 by 120 is a little bit larger, but I can tell you 3 guys right now that would go and buy that from us if.
But the largest building you're considering, how many aircraft would that house?
Probably 10. 10 small aircraft. You could maybe fit 1 or 2 more or less depending on the size, but they're not.
Yeah, Chad Payment came to one of our meetings there, and you could build up to 12,000 square feet without a fire suppression system on it, and that's why the separate buildings, and that makes sense.
Yeah, it was both of them. It was not only the fire suppression. You can actually build that building, but you got to put a double wall inside there in each 12,000 foot section. Well, but still, the building is so huge that like one guy in the state of Minnesota would want to buy that. So this puts it to a reasonable building size.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
So now on to the MinSpec agreement. Dan?
Yeah, mayor's, members of council, I think it was last meeting, we brought the initial MinSpec agreement with the numbers in it, just to kind of, as we've had some staffing changes in the city's building division, we've had the need to go out and look at contract building inspections. Had that plan moving forward, and then we received the resignation of the city's building official, which then forced us to go back to the drawing board and go back to MinSpec to meet with them to see if they were able to meet the additional need, because the original plan had envisioned the current building official doing commercial inspections and backup residential inspections as we kind of got through this thin period before we were able to staff back up. Last week, Chief Newman and I did meet with MinSpec and asked them if they would be able to meet the demand of increased services. They did say they would be able to, and they provided us with an additional contract or an updated contract from what was originally presented. There are a few changes to that contract from what was originally presented, because there's been some pretty significant changes to the scope of work as a result of it. Beforehand, when they were looking at the residential inspection, if you remember, we were looking at approximately 4 or 5 hours a day worth of residential inspection. They would be able to fit that in with the current inspectors. Going in now to basically being almost full-time building inspectors out here, they had to do some additional staffing adjustments. So the price there did go up by $5 an hour for residential inspection. Another key difference is that the current building official holds the official designation for the city as the building official. When he leaves, we do need to designate someone as the building official. We do have an employee who could take that designation. However, they're out on an approved leave. And with them on leave, we don't have anybody currently qualified in staff to take that building official designation. MinSpec is able to do that. So they do charge $1,500 a week for that designation. What's included in that is any builder who has a question on a specific portion of code, any specific portion of a plan review, they are able to call MinSpec, and MinSpec will act as a building official and be able to reference any questions they have. So there is services that are offered to the city from that designation. The plan at this point is we need to designate them as the building official temporarily. Once the employee who's on leave comes back, we would take that designation back in-house and provide them with notice. The current contract does allow with a 2-week notice that we're able to take the designation back from MinSpec back into the city of Forest Lake. We also are looking at having to add, in addition to the residential inspector, a certified building official who's a commercial inspector. There's an additional chart. The rate structure is a little bit different for the commercial inspections versus the residential inspections. And the final difference between this contract and the one that was presented before is we'd be looking at having to do MinSpec to do our plan review. At this point, in the current fee that they're charging for plan review is 55% of the permit fee, which is listed on the city's fee schedule. Looking at what's kind of anticipated for need, we're looking at more than 4 hours a day worth of building inspections from MinSpec. However, they're located kind of in the southwest corner of the city. So if we do have a day where we only have 2 hours worth of inspections booked for them, they would charge us an additional $50 for a trip charge just to cover their trip up here. I don't anticipate us going below that. If we would have a day where we just had 2 inspections, we would probably book them on another day, so we wouldn't have to incur that trip charge. However, if there is kind of a need for an inspection that has to get done that day, that option is on the table. I've also got assurances from MinSpec that I know there was some concern from some of our larger commercial jobs that are out in the market right now, that they didn't want a different inspector every time they came out. They wanted to kind of keep some continuity from the inspector. MinSpec did agree that they would send the same inspector out on commercial job sites, so there would be that continuity that's there once they're up to speed. We also are looking at, if this is approved, doing some investing and making sure that we have them on board before the current building official leaves, so we can kind of get them up to speed, get them trained in, so it's not just kind of set them out in the wild and have them go, that they will have the resources that they need to move forward. City staff at this point, based on this, will still be doing the scheduling. We have a very good scheduling system here where we can account for all the travel time. We know how far it gets location-wise among the cities, so we're going to keep that in-house. We are also going to keep all of the maintenance of the records in-house. So at the end of the day, the inspector will turn in their logs. We'll then import those using current city staff. 2 reasons for that. A, they already know the software, so it's more efficient to have current city staff do it. Secondly, if there's any questions on what the inspector saw during that day, we can address it right then. So when we come back and all the services come back in-house, and we have that back up, that we have that knowledge in-house, we're not having to look at something from 6 months down the road and say, what happened on this inspection? We'll be able to address it at the point of entry. So city staff will still play involved in this role. From the builders who are calling for inspections, they'll notice, conceivably no change, because city staff will be answering the phone, will be taking care, will be scheduling it. The only difference that they will see was that the inspector who comes out will not just be, Chatter Nate, who's been currently going out there. That being said, there has been some changes. I did some initial costing this afternoon. Again, kind of at a high level, I anticipated a ballpark of about 10 hours of commercial inspections a week, about 6 hours of commercial inspections a day, so that'd be full days. And then look back on a monthly term, what this actually would cost out of the contract, basically all of our plan review and inspections out. In April, we were looking at approximately 2 weeks of having them be the designated building official. So you're looking at total cost estimate for April, about $17,400. In May, they'd be looking at it, having that building official designation for the entire month of May. Now, again, these dates can change depending upon when we get the position hired or when staff comes back. So these are just kind of some estimates I threw out there just to kind of get some numbers on the table. That being said, full-day inspections, 8 hours a day, with that split from 2 to 6, from the commercial to residential, you're looking at approximately 23,000 for May. And then in June, I don't anticipate having the building official designation with MinSpec in June. I anticipate at that point having it back in-house. And by doing that, we're looking at approximately 14,000 for building inspections in June, which would bring the total contract estimate at this point to approximately 55,000. If you look at what we have currently budgeted for professional services, which is what was presented during the workshop, which is a little over 32,000, and the estimated savings from not having a building official in that position, I anticipate approximately about a 6-week vacancy for that position. We're looking at a budget shortfall at this point of approximately $10,000 going with this contract. I also just kind of ran those numbers again, just looking at what the average weekly cost is, based on that contract. At this point, all conversations we have with MinSpec, they've basically given assurances that it would be as turnkey as possible, both on getting them spun up and having the inspections come back. There's a lot of moving parts on this one too, depending upon when staff is able to come back, when we're able to get that fire technician filled, and when we're able to kind of get Nate back out doing some building inspections. So we could see in June, we could see some reductions in the amount of residential hours that MinSpec is doing. But I kind of wanted to present more or less a worst case scenario here for the next 3 months. So if I come back in June and say, numbers are looking, the 14,000, I'm not saying it's going to be 8 and have to come back in June saying we're at 14. This basically right now, in essence, would be MinSpec doing all of the inspections for the next 3 months. Again, worst case scenario. However, there's a couple of pieces in there, again, depending upon when the inspector that approved leave comes back, that's going to take out some of the building official designation, and it's also going to free up some residential inspections and some commercial inspections in. So this plan could change, but I just wanted to kind of get some numbers out there for your feedback on. And again, staff recommendation at this point is an approval of the agreement with MinSpec. So we have building inspection services starting April 1st.
Thank you, Dan. Now, all plan review is staying in-house then?
At this point, we're going to actually, plan review would need to go down to MinSpec because with Chad currently doing all plan review.
That included in this?
That fee is basically, we were getting 55% of the permit fee. So Al did an analysis. So basically, if the permit fee is $1,000 worth of, the permit fee charge of $1,000, the plan review, the city would charge that is $650, so a total of $1,650. MinSpec would get 55% of the permit revenue, which is $550. So the city would retain $1,100, and MinSpec would get $550 on a $1,000 building permit for the plan review section of it. Any permits that don't have plan review, we retain all of the permit revenue at that point. It's only if a plan review is required. And again, that's only until we get a building official back on who's capable of plan review, which, at some point I anticipate would happen during the course of those 3 months.
Okay.
Do we have, one of my overall concerns on the agreement is we don't have anything contractual that I'm seeing around timelines, and I know that we have some we have some responsibilities, just baseline service standards of what we want to maintain, but there's some other situations where we have plan review, and I think we are obligated to hit some timelines. Do we need some contractual language to help us support that? It sounds like the logistics have been worked out, but I think I'd be looking for some contract language to help us protect that.
Maybe she can speak, because he had a conversation with them just on what their current plan review, they have a commitment when you sign up with them that they give it back. Is it 2?
Residential is 10 business days, and commercial is 15 for plan review.
And that matches up to currently what our kind of standards are, correct? Or is that a
correct
variation? Okay.
I would recommend we just add that into the contract. Just let's get that assurance that, and it's their requirement that they have the capacity to meet that need.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other questions? Dan, I think you did a good job. I think was addressing a urgent need, and with the weather hopefully warming up, it's definitely going to be time soon. So I'll look for a motion to approve this, or
make a motion that we approve the contract as written.
As written or with?
As amended,
As
or-
amended.
No, my motion was as written.
Okay. Do you have a second on that? No? All right, we'll look for another motion.
I'd make a motion that we accept the contract from, as amended.
By Morrow.
By Morrow.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Dan, can you go through the fund balance transfer, please?
Yep. Mayor, members of the council, at the last workshop, I presented just the excess fund balance that we had from 2017 funds. And based on, again, the initials that I got back from Gail, was that we had an excess fund balance of, general fund was over 70% of the 2018 budgeted expenses. Again, recommendation of the state auditor is approximately 50% retainage in fund balance. So we have excess fund balance of approximately over $1 million, $1,056,270, in that we would need to transfer out into separate funds moving forward. You see on your screen here is just kind of a breakdown where that came from. A lot of it was excess permit revenue fee that came in last year, a little over $500,000 worth of that. Some public savings, public safety came in under budget, public works came in under budget, and Parks and Rec came in under budget. So that's where those fees came, or those funds came from. Again, the recommendation here is to view these are one-time funds. These are not, guaranteed to come in annually. These are just basically one-time excess fund revenues that we have. What was discussed during the last workshop were some options for where those funds could be transferred. I did go back and update this transfer option spreadsheet here to kind of establish what was heard back at the workshop. We looked back at establishing a gravel road paving fund at approximately $200,000 in there, paying off the TIF District 21 debt service fund with $157,000 there. Put some capital towards the Headwater Industrial Park Fund 21, looking at $10,000 there. There was some discussion at the senior center, which would be the replacement of the dishwasher front door and a key card entry system. That charge there, the amount required to do that work would be $25,000. The police squad laptops were also discussed at $50,000, and then replacing one vehicle in the building inspections at $25,000. What I did was I created a spreadsheet that kind of keeps a running total if there are any substantial changes to that. Those numbers that were presented there. What this spreadsheet also does is anything that's left over basically has it going to the capital equipment fund. I did confirm with Gail that if money is transferred into the capital equipment fund, which at a later date needs to come back out to fund a one-time project, we are able to pull back out of that fund. There's no restrictions on, basically once it's in there, it's got to be spent on capital. We are able to, if we need to make a withdrawal for another project, we are able to pull money back out of there. So what I did here is a kind of a self-totaling spreadsheet. So if there are any changes to that, we can kind of keep a running total tonight as discussion kind of happens on what to do with this fund balance. Assuming, again, that the excess goes into the capital equipment fund. One thing I also got confirmation on was that the pending difference for the airport overrun has not been accounted for. So that is still potentially needs to figure out a funding revenue source for that. That right now is just sitting in the airport construction fund. So until we kind of get through the mediation and get that kind of behind us, there could be a potential liability there as well. Just wanted everybody in the council to be aware that this excess fund balance does not have that taken out of it. So this could be reduced by whatever we need to pay to based on the overrun for the airport. So with that, I'm just looking for a motion to direct where you want these excess funds moved. The way the motion is set up is that this spreadsheet here then at the end of the discussion will become the attachment to the memo, and I'll present this with Gail, and then she can make the transfers as directed by council. So with that, I open it up for questions or discussion on kind of where we want this fund balance transferred to.
All right, thank you, Dan. I don't think I'm ready to move anywhere on this quite yet. I think there are quite a few questions. First off, the Fund 251, we never did hear the balance of that one.
I thought I put it in there. I believe what I heard back, that balance is pretty substantial. I want to say it was somewhere in the ballpark of 750,000. I mean,
You sent it to us in a separate cover, and I think it was something.
yeah, it was fairly high. And again, the intent there was as the land sold at Headwaters, those fees would be paid back. However, the auditors have recommended they'd like to see some type of just movement on that, whether to be something in there. I think that was kind of the intent here, where it's obviously $10,000 and a $750,000 balance is not a lot, but it does show that it is on the city's radar screen, and we are making an effort to pay that fund balance down.
I wasn't aware that the cost overruns at the airport weren't accounted for yet either. That's going to make a significant impact when we look at these numbers. I think we need to look at, worst case scenario, best case scenario. The establishing a gravel road fund, I think that's extremely important to get done. But I think we need to have, just as important there is, a policy on how we're going to spend that money. So we're not, people aren't assuming that they're going to get a free road. I mean, we need to establish a policy before we put that money in there, or as we put that money in there anyway, as to how it gets allocated and what, who determines that priority, I guess, type of thing. So I think that needs to be done as soon as possible. The squad laptops, I think it's a great idea for that money. But as we talked to the chief, is it better to replace them all at once and then, have that big expense all the time? Or is there a way we can get this to where we're replacing one or two every year and it's just a normal budget item, which I would much prefer finding a way to, get beyond these big humps or big expenses that, aren't budgeted for anyway. So I would like to hear back if there's, a way we can, set that or move that forward, or if there's a way we can commit the money to it, but not replace them all at once, but just, get into that routine anyway. So look for any other comments or questions on what we have in front of us.
I do have a question. I guess it's more for Ryan than. Is there any benefit to, you're going to do the seal and overlay? Is that what you're doing now for a contract?
Later this evening, we'll have the reclamation and double chip seal.
I guess my question would have been if we were to expand that, put more money into it, could we get more work done with maybe attract more favorable bids?
Yes, but long answer is that we've been planning for certain roads to have this application applied based on millions being placed there. Allowing us time or years to put millions there allows us to increase the strength of the base to support this, basically a waterproof membrane. If we just go do this on some of the gravel roads, I know we got a meeting tomorrow with adjacent communities, so I was out driving some of the gravel roads, and we haven't done this. Obviously, they're very soft and muddy, so that wouldn't be a good application just to add it now. I mean, honestly, our local road projects are falling short on lineal feet than we want to go because all the utility work that's having to be done in the area that we're now. So we did break it into kind of two areas to continue in the old part of the city, but then also continue to be able to gather at least some millions off another area that really needs work too. So I don't know, the strategic way would be to put more money in the local project to get more millions generated to then set up the double chip seal on your really low volume rural roads and play that balance attack. I mean, it's tough to just make a decision right here, right now without knowing some distances and stuff to give you a factual answer, but that'd be your best strategy. Otherwise, I did bring up three options that you guys have some money source. if you wanted to look and see what that would generate, that's a continuous money source to go into your local roads, or your gravel road pot of money for, say, that goes back to the additional franchise fees. I know we're collecting over 700,000, but that's just what's given to your local project. Your increased state aid allotment through your maintenance allotments. We know we have 4 years of increase, and I don't know how that's been divvied up. And then whatever assessments you've had from 15th Street, Then you get into these, you got into a reconstruction on your gravel roads too, obviously you'd have assessments there. So would that be redirected back into a future gravel road project, part of the policy discussion?
Okay.
Or you could just jumpstart it now, or keep the fund flexible. There's just a lot going on just to answer that question tonight.
Yeah. I think it's well worth having a discussion over, looking at those other fund balances to see what we can do. But yeah, doing some more, whether it's just sealing the asphalt roads we have now, or wherever we can use that maintenance. Lift stations, I think, is another question. If we can do 2 or 3 more of those as the project goes ahead. I would also like to talk about committing some funds to the potential 180th overpass, and we're going to need money to lobby federal, state, other things. So there's going to have to be a $50,000, $80,000, $100,000 for something like that.
Do we have an estimate of what that ask would be, or what that effort would be?
For 180th lobbying?
If we were to kind of do let's say, make it broader than just lobbying, but just like a 180th campaign, what would that take?
Yeah, well, the engineering, the build the case, everything else, maybe Ryan.
Put Ryan on the spot.
So MnDOT went pretty clear through the process of if you ever getting access to the Federal Highway Administration's road authority. And they talked, that process, that document to deliver, if you split up between 4 communities, but they talked about that being, a $100,000 process. And because we were obviously asking about, a potential ramp off of 35 at County Road 32, and that's how we got all that info. But certainly you would have to go through that same process with the future interchange connection, new connection at 35E and 180th. I would hope there would be, support between multiple communities in that.
What is the timing of those? What time frame are those dollars well spent?
I think, first of all, we have to build consensus locally, and part of that starts again tomorrow. And then we'll have to build county support, Noker County, Washington County, and then MnDOT, and then FHWA, Federal Highway Administration.
The mayor's point for us, like walking in with consensus, and we've already put some money behind it.
Well, I think we stand to benefit so significantly from it that, we better be willing to make a financial commitment at this point. I do believe there's strong consensus between all 4 communities, between both counties, but, that's, it benefits everybody. But then, who's putting the money into it? And that's where we got to lobby MnDOT and the feds, and that's going to cost something to get that done.
Just having someone, I guess, that provides you flexibility at a future time to make a determination of something.
So, any thoughts?
Well, no, we certainly need to have that money available for that kind of a study, there's no question about that. But, on the gravel road paving fund, I don't know how we could possibly come up with some kind of a distribution of that money tonight. Either we should.
Well, no, that's why I'm saying we shouldn't, I just don't want to throw it in the corner for future and then I want my road paved. Well,
Well,
how do we do it?
if the fund is there, we got some kind of pumping money into that fund. But
I just want to have more of a little bit more of a guiding policy. As the council determine how much, But, you know, when people ask, I think it's only fair that administration be able to tell them that, you know, okay, city pays half, landowners pay half, a third, 2/3, you know, whatever we determine that might be. Or do we want to set a maximum based on current, you know, 500 feet of paving or something? Because there's areas that really should get done, but they may only be owned by 1 or 2 people, and they're very long stretches.
That's the issue, that trying to determine what percentage is going to get paid. It's going to be a tough deal to figure that out, because each road is going to be a completely separate issue, I think.
Right.
So
I agree with you, though, that, so today, our funding matches our policy, which is 100% paid, and we do send a confusing message if we fund without changing the policy, and so.
And I don't want it just to be a first come, first serve.
Correct.
I think it should be greatest need to go through that. I mean, hopefully we can spend all that money, because it is gonna, you know, be a lot more with the private investment, and really get some roads taken care of in the old township area that need to get done. So, but yeah, we need to come up with some type of basic guiding policy for that.
We did have discussion at the workshop also about there being some benefit to the departments that are significantly under budget, in this case, Public Works, Public Safety, and Parks and Recreation, and having some mechanism where it's not a use it or lose it mentality, but that those dollars would be available to
Right.
stay. I mean, we made a policy decision in 2017 to allocate money for that way, in that manner, and it wasn't all spent, so let's keep some available. I think logistically, Dan's going to tell us, and the accountants are going to tell us, that would stay in by keeping some general fund balance available. But I wanted to, I guess, have the conversation on how do we financially make that happen. That was our intent in the last conversation. How do we financially make that happen so that future need in each of those departments, that money's available and not just squirreled away?
Yes, I mean, the way I understand it, so like and I do like the IT budget at this point, if I come in and say 15,000 under budget in the IT budget, it just goes into the general fund, and then from there it can get allocated out to say capital equipment. You can send it back, like I know there was a year back where Parks came in under budget by, I can't remember what, the 50,000 or whatever, and that there was a resolution at the end of the year where that went back in for another project down the road, where I think it was playground equipment replacement, so that money was basically just budgeted back in as a, you know, there was change, so one from 16 to 17. For a lot of this stuff, like with like the Public Works and some of the public safety stuff, a lot of the capital equipment fund purchases do directly benefit those two departments. So in essence, by putting it in the capital equipment fund, you are kind of helping them with, instead of having to come up with, you know, for the police squad laptop replacement, for example, at this point, doing all of them at one time, you could just every 5 years just say, we're going to put in the capital equipment every 5 years, we're just going to do the whole fleet at one time at a $50,000 investment and fund it that way. Or you could kind of do it as you build a new squad car. You know, there's multiple options there. I guess if you're looking for some long-term flexibility at this point, you know, and talking with Gail, was that if you stick in the capital equipment fund, you are able to, if you have something specific come up, you can pull that money back out. Again, there's no restrictions on pulling it back out. The reason why we want to put it into a specific fund is that the auditors don't like to see that much fund balance sitting there, and they would like to have the motion to get back within that 50%. So when we come back in, we're looking at we're within, you know, budget amounts. There are some, that being said too, on some of the capital equipment fund, there are some pretty large purchases in the pipeline. I know there's a couple of fire trucks that need to get replaced. There's some additional, believe some bigger public works purchases down the road as well. So there are some, you know, kind of things on the horizon that, you know, would need some capital behind it. So it might not be a bad idea to kind of put that in there. But again, it's your discretion if you want to, you know, say public safety did come in under budget. You know, you could say we'll give the 50,000 to the squad laptop replacement. It is a need at this point in the department, since most of those computers are right at the edge of being out of date. They're right at that, you know, where they should be in the replacement cycle.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody want to make any adjustments to any of these amounts?
Well, I think Dan did a really good job of getting this figured out, and I wouldn't have any objection with what he has there.
I just for a point of clarity, do you want to keep the gravel road paving fund there, or do you want that zeroed out and put that into the capital equipment? I know there was some discussion that kind of back and forth on putting the policy first or the funding first. I mean, if you put it in the capital equipment fund, if you set a policy, then you could pull it back out and say, we're just, again, with not knowing what the overrun is actually going to cost at the end of the day, what that amount's going to be, you may want to just put that in the capital equipment fund to kind of keep it there in the back of your mind, saying if we do need to come up with to cover that overage, we would be able to pull it out of the capital equipment fund. And putting that $200,000 in there would not significantly reduce the amount of money available for future capital purchases. Again, it's just an option at this point.
I guess I'd prefer to leave it there. I think it's just a priority for us to come up with a policy for it. And then a policy or a line item in the budget to continue to fund that as we move forward. And I would like to add a line item for engineering and or other services for 180th. I think we need to take the lead and make a financial commitment at this time. If it doesn't come to fruition, it goes back in the general fund.
Do you have an amount you want to?
50?
50, 100, 75, somewhere in the middle. I think if we start with whatever you guys are comfortable with, I'm okay with minimum of 50. I know it's going to cost that, if not more.
And I would prefer we call it campaign rather, it might be lobbying, but it's more than just lobbying. There's an overall information effort that will be required for that to be successful.
Well, I'd sure be comfortable with the 50,000, just to make a statement on it.
Start it,
So.
yeah.
Sounds good.
And my spreadsheet actually worked. It did total. I was hoping it would. So yeah, by basically doing that, you have subtotal of all of these items up here. You have about 17,000 going into this breakdown here, which puts 539 into the capital equipment fund.
Could,
Ryan, is there anything else that
I do have maybe
you should look at?
I do have maybe a request, and it kind of piggybacks on Councilmember Eigner's comments about continuing or making faster progress on our roads. I guess maybe the request is for Ryan to look for, are there some short-term opportunities or short-term projects we could fund is there an opportunity to augment what we currently have approved for 2018 as a plan, that in a future meeting we would take some of those fund out of what we're doing for this contribution to the capital equipment fund, at least have some options on the table.
Yeah, that's fine.
We don't know what that dollar amount is, so no need to have an earmark here, but let's continue that conversation, just knowing that we might make those fund allocations at a future date.
So the local project, we have not brought the plans back yet to approve plans and specs and authorize that for bid. If you had the desire to add some lineal feet to that project, we would kind of look, obviously, areas that would touch the existing projects, so our mobilizations are all right there, and we'll just basically continue down the road. Another thing that was brought up previously was water meter replacements. Now, that's something that, you get those old ones replaced that aren't getting those low flow reads out. You come in and replace them, and instantly you've got now more revenue into your water fund, which is probably your fund that's hurting the most. And you're basically giving free water away.
Okay. Do we know about where our water fund is at? Can we support?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. I can look into that though and figure out where that fund balance is.
Okay.
It might be. Let me take a quick look to my email and see if I can't find if it was in there.
guess one of the things I'd like to ask is, technology-wise, in the outer regions of Forest Lake, obviously we don't have nowhere near the funding to do something, but is there a way we can use some money to try and get something built out there, try and get that internet, the higher speed broadband, things like that, extended into areas that really should have it right now?
Yeah, there is, the current cable franchise agreement does have an opportunity where the city, I think, pays 50% of a project. Midco was required to pay the additional 50%. So if you wanted to identify one, and that was one of the reasons we went for the broadband internet grant applications, was that would become the city's 50% match, would then be forced or require Midco to do the additional funding. So that is an option if you wanted to, do a, say, $100,000 project. It would cost the city $50,000 to do an expansion. Costing wise, I know that probably wouldn't get that many feet done, because I know putting it in is pretty expensive per mile. However, it is a way to kind of do some of those bridge neighborhoods out there, that some of those last mile services, because a lot of that last mile services probably are going to present quite the challenge for the city, just because Midco won't, when they do the math, they don't have enough subscribers to justify the infrastructure costs unless it's supplemented by, the city. And that the agreement does allow for a 50% match for that to happen.
Okay. Well, Dan, you can follow up with the water later with us. We can.
Yeah, I can't. I really don't have it here. Sorry about that.
Any other questions on? So you just need a motion on?
Yeah, I would need the motion that's in the packet. Second, and I'll just, if this spreadsheet is okay with the council, I will just use this one as the amounts that are there. I'll just scroll it down. So there's the totals.
All right, we'll look for a motion.
I'll make a go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to make a motion that we accept the spreadsheet as Dan has presented now, with the additional $50,000 for the engineering campaign for the 180th Street, and that's it.
All right. Do we have a second on that?
I'll second. Go ahead.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. One more for you, Dan.
Last one of the night, so after this, you won't have to hear me go anymore. Maybe members of the council, I have an update just on the internal recruitment process for the city administrator position. There was a request of me to basically design up what an internal recruitment process, one that was managed basically more in-house, would look like. I did do that. Before I kind of go into that, I'll just kind of caveat that out with, while this is a viable approach, this is probably not the recommended approach from staff's perspective. In speaking with Bridget this afternoon, there are a few potential legal pitfalls that we would want to avoid with this, such as the recommendation to set up a subcommittee for managing the hiring process would be subject to open meeting laws. So a lot of those negotiations would happen out in the public. Again, this would, from staff's perspective, would lean more towards you'd want to have the outside firm managing all of this. So that would be done kind of a little bit, not so much in the open. However, again, council's discretion, they are able to do this. Again, the recommendation would not be to fully do an internal one, just because, again, there are some legal pitfalls. This is a fairly, the candidates you typically get for this know city government, so they know if there is a stumbling block, they typically will be able to point that out. Another point that Bridget brought up was, in the end, for example, if you're doing salary negotiations, if that comes out of that subcommittee, the terms would be discussed in a public meeting. So the person who would then be, you'd offer them the position, but they know what your top is, potentially. So again, possible, but probably not recommended. And again, you could do that if you just basically, there are sort of ways to massage it. I'm just kind of giving full disclosure as terms of some of the pitfalls for that. Basically, just what I've done is kind of looking at what staff is currently able to do given current workloads, current staffing levels. Broke this down to what staff was able to do, and then what would be at that point either council responsibility or council subcommittee responsibility. Basically, staff at this point would be able to. I took the existing position announcement, which was the one that was used in 2011, updated just the figures on it. Did a little bit of massaging of the language so it read a little clearer, and called that one good. The position description is unchanged from 2011. So we're using some outdated position announcement and description language there. But basically, staff could take that and then post that to the League of Minnesota Cities Job Board, the city website, and the Forest Times. Basically, kind of running this like we would other recruitments. That's typically where we would post those positions that we are recruiting for. Set an application period up through the middle to the end of April. Oops, sorry about that. Through the end of April, and then close those out. So the application acceptance policy would, or how that procedure would work is I have talked to Bailey. She would be the point person for collecting the applications. There would also be then a Laserfiche folder, which is our archive that we use for document storage. We'd set up a secure folder on that archive, and access would only be given to Bailey and members of the hiring subcommittee or council, whoever's going to be managing the process. So then council and Bailey will be the only ones who have access to that folder, so it's kind of firewall, so it's not just anybody can get access to it, because there is, as this moves forward, the nuance of applicant data is technically private until finalists are revealed. So this would not be something that we could keep kind of like we did with the council position announcement where those can become public right away. These would be private until the moment of a finalist. Again, the applicants you typically would get for this, a lot of them would be administrators from other cities, so they probably would want that application material private until they became a serious candidate, which is, again, standard practice for this type of recruitment. So that kind of dovetails out of phase one, which then moves into phase two. Here we'd have Bailey collecting the applications. The council or the council hiring committee would develop the scoring criteria for the applications, and then at some point, when you close the application, we'll look at what the application pool actually looks like and decide, do we want to move forward with what we currently have? Do we want to extend it out to try to get more candidates in there? It would just kind of depend on what the numbers are coming in. Do we feel like we have enough in there to make the decision to go to the next round, which is at that point is you can either do it in a, I have in here you can do the semifinalists, and then from the semifinalists go to a finalist position. Again, that's typically in line with how we've run recruitments here. We usually do 2 rounds of interviews. Council would have the discretion if they just want to do finalists at this point. They would not have to do the semifinalist route. If they do just the finalists, it does simplify the process a little bit in the fact that at the finalist, then that information becomes public. So there would be a little bit of simplification if they just limited to the finalist position. And then you'd go through the finalist interviews. Prior to going through that, you'd want to determine what are those interview panels going to look like. Do you want to do, one option would be like a full day interview. The candidates come in, they meet with the council, they meet with community members, they meet with department heads, they get a tour of the city. Sometimes they'll do different community events just to kind of have everybody kind of come in and meet the candidates. Again, that part would be up to the discretion of the council. Basically, the finalists once the finalists are interviewed, you would then make the offer to one. The League of Minnesota Cities does recommend having a second candidate in line just in case the first candidate does not work. Talking to Bridget, she thinks that's maybe a little bit not an unneeded step. I'm just, again, was kind of summarizing some of the data that was in the League of Minnesota's memo. And then once a finalist is selected, you would then go through the background check policy or background check portion of it. I did reach out and spoke with Chief Peterson. They have a background firm that does this type of more exhaustive background check where they do full reference, they do educational check, they do a little bit deeper dive into the actual background of the candidate. That firm would be available here to offer the more deeper dive on the background check if council wants that. Once the background check is completed, you then go into contract negotiations with the candidate. Once the contract's negotiated, it comes back to council for final approval, and then the candidate starts. Again, typical time frame for a full recruitment on here, you're probably looking at, on an aggressive timeline, end of June, July, but that's assuming that everything just goes off without a hitch. There's no delay in the process. More realistically, most times when you do recruitment like this, you're probably looking at, probably August, September, realistically. Just to kind of give you an idea of timeline, again, that can kind of flex back and forth depending upon council availability, candidate availability, dates, meetings, all that type of stuff. But I wanted to at least present kind of what that internal process looks like. If you desire to go with the internal process, we would need a motion approving the position description and a position announcement, so you get those posted. And then a second motion, if you decide to go with the subcommittee, is basically setting up that subcommittee and assigning members to it. Again, if you have specific questions as to kind of how that open meeting process works, Bridget can speak to that. Again, this is an option. However, I think just kind of given current demands on staff, I mean, if you're looking for a really good vetted process, a recommendation, at this point would be to look at an outside firm. However, based on initial feedback, I wanted to present something that what the internal would look like, so that's what's here. So at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have regarding this, the process.
I guess my first question being that initial interview with the candidates, is that something we can do via a conference call, anything like that? They don't have to be here present, so.
Yeah, you can do that. I mean, there are some recruitment processes for that initial one. We'll have the candidates actually submit a video. They can they'll have there's softwares out there that you can do that. They would set up, ask them 3 questions, and they would answer as they go. Then you could use that for that initial. But yeah, you are able to use a Skype interview if you want to for that.
And since we're negotiating contracts, why wouldn't that be through a closed meeting?
It's, Mayor, members of the council, it's not something that can be done in a closed meeting. It's not an exception to the open meeting law for this employment contract negotiation process. So typically what would happen is if the council reaches consensus on someone they want to hire, then they would say, okay, we're going to authorize the city attorney to enter into contract negotiations. They might set a cap for salary and kind of give some parameters. Then in our experience, the city attorney has gone back and negotiated, tried to negotiate a contract. And if, for example, the salary cap is this amount and the applicant says, no, I want this plus, then we'd bring it back to the council for consideration. And we've certainly seen situations where a first choice candidate and a council can't reach consensus on contract terms.
Well, I mean, it's public knowledge what the salary is at the moment, and we're in line with other municipalities of our size, so there isn't, I don't know if there's going to be a whole lot of negotiating at that point anyway, just what step basically is where that comes in at.
And there are also some other, usually in the admin contracts too, there's additional, is there a car allowance, is there a cell phone allowance, is there a severance package allowed with that too? So some of those details are also part of the negotiation. So it's salary basically and kind of a full benefits package that's negotiated at that point.
Well, I guess I would like to go ahead with an internal recruitment. If things start going south, we're seeing, too much, something happening. We always had the option of going with a firm, but I don't see paying $20,000+ is going to bring us anything. I believe it's a pretty tight-knit community of administrators out there. I think the person that they're going to apply, they already know about the job. They're waiting for an opening to come or the listing to come.
I'm not at all comfortable internally with if every step along the way, look at everything that is in yellow here and all of the decisions that 2 council members will have to make. If that is all part of the public process, develop your scoring criteria. If I'm an applicant and I know what the scoring criteria is before going into a job interview, you can bet my job interview has changed from what it would be without knowing the scoring criteria. And I just feel like we are at a significant disadvantage, just process-wise, because again, it requires a subcommittee of council to essentially play all cards in public. That when you are making a strategic decision, we will be at a disadvantage than what we would if we had somebody negotiate using their professional skill, making those decisions, and approaching it from a far more neutral. You've got a neutral territory if we have a third party, and I think there's value in that.
I agree. I mean, this is something that's such a, like I said before, last meeting, it's a big deal. And the other thing too, there's some guarantees that go with these firms too that could help us in the long run, I think. And I agree that there's probably a small pool of people out there, but I think it's a good idea. To me, it'd be a great idea and money well spent to have that outside help.
Any thoughts, Ed?
No, except the public portion kind of worries me.
I think we need to talk to Mary Lee about that and get an opinion from her.
I think we should go into it with eyes wide open, and if that's what you would like to do, I think that makes it's prudent. I think I'm comfortable with the information we have from our current city attorney, but I think we want to know specifically, and it's an area. Also, remember, this is where it doesn't matter if you're a city or any organization. These are areas where organizations get themselves into trouble very quickly if things go poorly. And I think we just want to be very clear of what's public, what's not public, and what the roles are for everybody involved.
Well, and every city is in the same position in hiring. I mean, we're not unique. Whether we go through a firm or we do it ourselves, we're faced with the same criteria.
I think our difference here is that we don't have somebody internally able to run the recruitment for us, and I think that's the if we were Scandia, for example, if they consider doing an internal recruitment, they have staff that have that capability and have that capacity, and I think we're struggling on both capacity and also capability, given that we may have an applicant sitting in a very key role. I think that's what's different is they have staff doing it, and staff don't have those same public disclosure requirements that we will have as a council subcommittee. We might be a bit unique.
Well, I think if we can get opinion from Mary Lee on what her flexibility is there, I still just think that it's a lot of money to get the same pool of candidates I think we're going to get on our own. Or at least give it a try to start with, to see what pool of candidates we get. Yeah. And if there's, I just think it's not going to be as daunting or challenging as it appears. The people we're going to hire are experienced. They're coming into this with the same type of knowledge we are, and they know what the salary is going to be. Are they going to play the game and answer questions the way we want them to hear?
Absolutely.
Of course they are. I mean, that's with any recruitment you do. So I just don't see this as being a really unique animal, other than, yes, it's staffing challenge, but I believe that is something that can be overcome, or we can utilize our other resources like Mary Lee and Bridget and other people to help us through some of that. Do we want to wait to get an opinion on that, or do we want to have a motion which way we want to go, or at least start advertising for candidates to see feedback on that?
So I'm not comfortable moving forward until we know how the process is going to be administered. I think we need to be clear on who's doing what the roles are, and how we're also maintaining confidentiality of the applicants, and having certain portions of the meeting required to be open, or certain portions required to be open to the public. I think we have to just know clearly what that process is. So I'm not in a position of tonight being comfortable moving forward personally.
I agree with Councilman Bain that I'm not comfortable tonight with making that decision. I value Mary Lee, her opinion. She's been on both sides of the desk. She's been on the council, and she's obviously involved in personnel. So I would like to hear her opinion as to what has to be public and what does not.
All right.
I'm okay with that. So I can reach out to her and have her draft something or a memo up that just kind of takes this and kind of maybe looks at the legal challenges or what, where do we have public versus private, on that side of it, and maybe puts a little bit more of a legal lens to the framework that's here. And again, until that's decided, I'd recommend not going forward with, putting the position out there, because you don't want to kind of get the cart before the horse. You want to make sure you're going through this with the right position description that's out there. I mean, and a key component of having a consultant is that they help the council define what you're looking for in that next administrator. That's kind of a key component of what a consultant can do. They'll sit down and say, what's the vision of this council? Where do you want it to go? And they can kind of help craft that description to kind of get that candidate to fit what they're looking for. Again, what we have here is basically what was presented from the council in 2011. There's the landscape has changed in Forest Lake in the past 7 years. I mean, this building wasn't here 7 years ago. We have a lot of infrastructure that wasn't here 7 years ago. Is the vision still in line with that? I mean, probably there's some similarities, but there might be some differences there. But I can go back to Mary Lee, get a memo from her, just kind of again there and bring that forward, and then see if, at that point, given the legal challenges, if they are there, if they do materialize, we can help guide the decision there.
All right, thank you. And Ryan.
Mayor, City Council, within your council packet is a request to approve plans and specifications and authorize ad for bid for the 2018 reclamation and double chip seal project that is proposed on Henna, Harrow, 190th and 240th. Obviously, we brought this forward towards the last meeting, so a quick turnaround on something this small with regards to paperwork, I should say. But we would hold the bid opening April 19th and have the bids brought forward towards the April 23rd City Council meeting for potential award. If there's not any questions, we look for a request for the City Council to approve plans and specifications and authorize ad for bid for the 2018 reclamation and double chip seal project.
So this is millings they already have taken up, or they're grinding them up that are on the road right now and resealing them.
Yep, so the millings that have been placed on these roadways obviously get really hard, and that's where Public Works had to make a decision last year. Do we continue to use our blacktop fund to make these smooth, or do we come in and do something alternative that's a much lower cost but still serving the purpose that it needed to be? So the reason we have to come in with the reclaimer is to reclaim these millings up that are so hard packed they can't blade them out anymore. So that's why they've been throwing hot mix on this stuff. So we'll reclaim it, shape it, tolerance it, and compact it, and then do 2 layers of double chip seal on it.
And obviously that has to be done after road restrictions are off.
Oh, yeah.
And everything like that.
Yeah, so we just want to bid early just so we get in the queue of contractors' workload, and potentially they don't start this work till June. But specified June, July, and August it has to be done.
All right.
Basically 2-week process.
Any questions for Ryan?
This is not an assessment situation to a homeowner, is there?
No.
Zero assessment, yeah.
Yes?
No assessment.
It's no assessment.
This is the same project that we did in 17. So
Yeah, had really good results, so.
The only comment I'd like to make is at that Forest Boulevard where they did that, south of
The airport?
south of interstate removal to the airport. That road turned out beautiful with that process, and it was really cheap compared to the straight blacktop road.
And you don't add any oil? They don't add any oil? It just grinding it up and putting it down?
You put oil down, emulsion.
Okay. All right, yeah. I'll look for a motion.
So moved. Unless you want an explanation for the whole, it's for the 2018 reclamation of double chip seal, approved plans and specifications, and authorize the ad for bid.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. And the safe routes to school crossing.
Same request as the previous project, just different project. Obviously, it's been a long time since we've been here for this project because this is 80% grant funded with federal funds. So, just getting plans to approval of federal money takes long steps through the process, but we do have that approval. So tonight we're here requesting the City Council approve plans and specs, specifications, and authorize that for bid for the 2018 Safe Routes to School pedestrian connection improvements. So this was a grant that we obtained back in 2015. This fiscal year construction season is when it's allowable to be used. Like I said, 80% is funded with the grant, 20% is funded with state aid construction allotment funds. We've had several open houses with neighbors along the project improvements, just so they're all aware of the improvements and kind of find out if they had any special things buried in their yard, dog fences, irrigation, stuff like that. So obviously we've been at this for a very long time and have received federal approval. So with the anticipated schedule is within, we would have the bid opening the same day as the project we just talked about. But we have to have some extra time to bring back forward with award because it has to meet special requirements that have to be reviewed by those federal agencies and MnDOT. So it just allows for their time to do their paperwork, but still we'll have a May 14th bid award. And obviously this project will have to work well around 4th of July parade and school events. So that's all taken account within the project contracts. So if there's not any questions, we look forward to the City Council to approve plans and specs and authorize that for bid for the 2018 Safe Routes to School pedestrian connections improvement project.
A couple questions, Ryan. Is this a 6 foot wide sidewalk?
6 foot will be the minimum width of the sidewalk. There are places where it'll get wider just where it makes sense, whether you're tying into something for just to meet ADA or not to leave a grass strip somewhere.
Now, do we have the option of widening the road and making a bike walk lane that is part of the road so we don't have a separate plowing, snow removal issue, things like that?
You would not be able to have parking on the roads then.
Okay.
So we were able to escape a no parking resolution on this one because we're doing everything on the back side of the curb. Thus, we didn't reduce the width of the road to a degree. Some spots we are moving the curb a little bit, but we didn't reduce the width of the existing road to the degree that state aid would require no parking resolutions and signage.
Okay. And then by Schumacher Field, are the fences and everything in the way there, or is there enough room?
No relocation of fences.
Okay. Well, you always think it out good, Ryan. I just, is this the best locations for these? I mean, Southwest is going to be discontinued as a school.
Yeah, but it provides, whether that's a school or not, it provides a continuous framework for us to build upon the future for the residential neighborhood and apartment complexes that are within here. Part of this grant was we basically beat out cities like St. Paul, Minneapolis, because we tied it to some of the, I guess, income in the neighborhood where we had 21 plus apartment complexes. Missing links, it provides 3 connections to the Hardwood Creek Trail, and linkage now all the way over to the charter school off of 15th Street, continuously through the community to the Hardwood Creek Trail. So whether it's serving the purpose of Southwest Junior High's current needs now or future something else, provides that network with the neighborhood to get to somewhere, because right now they have nothing.
And can we continue this to 12th Street by Southwest? I mean, to me, I would think that would be a main or a great point to have a crosswalk.
Oh, on 7th there?
On 7th, yeah. Between
So part of
7th and
that,
12th.
we're mirrored up the site improvement plans with the school. So they got additional improvements that are coming that you don't see on this
So
plan.
it'll connect.
Yep.
It will connect.
We have a way to get all the way to 12th.
All right, great. Any other questions for Ryan?
I think this looks great. I drive this corner all of the time, right by Southwest, and there's frequently pedestrians, and it's a tough spot. So I think it's a nice next link. I'll make a motion that we approve the 2018 Safe Routes to School pedestrian connection improvements.
I'll second.
Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and Winnick Supply invoices.
Make a motion, we pay the Winnick Supply invoices?
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
And one abstain. Thank you. Staff updates.
Everybody left.
I think so.
I got an update why everybody did leave. I just found out from Chief Peterson that Lakes Area Trading Company is actually on fire right now, so that's why all the sirens have been going up there. So quite a big structure fire going on right now up in that.
Lots of ammunition in there too, huh?
So yeah, they're up there. So if you
Where's it at?
So,
The gun range, just
up north, just
over by Ace Hardware.
Over by the hardware store.
Yeah.
Yep. So I told them I'd update the council. It looks like they got it contained to the one business and the one to the east will be saved. So that's what they're working on right now.
All right. Well, thank you, Dan. Anything else?
I just want to update the council that we did receive word this morning that through AEM that Gail is resigning her position with AEM, and they will be sending out a new contract finance director. They're working on who that's going to be. So I'll be working with them on the transition for that to make sure it's a smooth transition. I was assured this morning that the audit for this year would not be impacted because most of that work has been done. But we'll be working on with them to ensure smooth transition because, again, Gail had been out here for a couple of years. So there's unfortunately a lot of institutional knowledge that goes with her, but they told me that there would be no disruption in service there. Attended the Lakes Area Expo. The city had a booth up there on Saturday from 8 until 1, I believe, or 1:30, and handed out quite a few recycling guides. That was a hot item at our table, allowing some public safety information, and just was able to get a lot of good feedback on Arts in the Park. A lot of people had a lot of good things to say about how that has evolved. Also was able to hand out a couple of applications too for some of the recruitments that we're currently doing. And speaking of recruitments are open through Friday for the intermediate accounting clerk and the fire technician position. Are starting to see a lot of good candidates come forward with that, so excited that we'll have a good pool when that closes this Friday. And that's at this point, that's what I have. Unless you have any questions of me.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions? Bailey, I missed you.
Yeah, I did receive some feedback regarding that massage therapist ordinance change that was brought to a workshop back in February, and we're working on getting that revised, and most likely we'll have it on the agenda for the next meeting.
All right. Bridget.
Thank you, Your Honor. No updates.
All right. And Ryan.
Mayor, City Council, I do have a few things to bring up. I know fire police is busy, but so is Public Works. They had to leave as a car hit a telephone pole and took out a transformer, so some lift stations are being manually operated with backup generators right now.
Oh, all hands on deck tonight, huh?
Yeah. I-35 project meeting with MnDOT's and the project team next Tuesday, April 3rd, so I'll probably find out pretty good details on what their schedule and startup here will be. I still haven't received any feedback on the Highway 97 access management study. I have until Wednesday to turn any feedback back. By Wednesday, I've asked MnDOT for a little extra time, and they have given it to us, but on Wednesday we're certainly past the deadline they were previously requesting. Some exciting construction news already starting. Timber Ridge Apartments will be having a pre-construction meeting next Wednesday, April 4th, so that project will be here getting going, has obtained all the site approval, so just wait until the old restrictions get pulled there. And then also the Lighthouse Lofts will start utility construction probably in about a week and a half now to 2, kind of waiting on frost to get out and just some minor staging on temporary water main shutoffs and stuff like that so we can get everything tied in. Last Monday, I brought up that I suggested we have a comp plan meeting to hash out some of these differences that have been discussed to date. We still don't have anything scheduled. I know Donovan's out next week, so if we don't get something pulled together, that's probably a 3-week loss, the most critical point of the project as we're trying to gear up for public hearings and still have a lot of things hanging out there. So I don't know if you get people that have been invited to participate in that could get times and dates back to Donovan so that meeting can be completed so things can move on, that would be very helpful. And that's kind of all I got, unless there's any questions.
No, I don't have any on that. I did let him know I was available anytime for that meeting, so that still stands. I do have one question off the subject, but real quick. Our decorative light poles. That's a city standard that was established. They're so close to the road, they're really taking a lot of abuse from the salt and spray, other things like that. Would we be able to modify that to have them set back 3 or 4 feet?
Yeah, you could. You certainly would have to look at the candle foot lighting and all that stuff.
Well, I mean, if they have a longer arm on
whether
them.
you put an arm bar on it.
Yeah.
You know, there's, not an expert in lighting, but there's a lot of things you can do, you know, so.
I mean, I think they look nice. I like the design, but I mean, there's got to be alternatives that are consistent with that design, but, you know, push back, 3, 4, 5 feet from the road so that they don't.
So Public Works has, you know, all those standard specification stuff too, and suppliers and contacts that maybe we just have them come in and show what, you know, models and makes that they can make and retrofits, if whatever options.
Well, not even retrofitting, but, you know, as we move forward, or, you know, lighthouse lofts or wherever else there may be, you know, getting installed in the future, that, you know, we could get something that wasn't just, you know, 4 inches from the road anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that you can do with them and add in them if you want electrical plugins for Christmas lights here and there and all that. I mean, some of the stuff downtown has drip lines built within it, so it's coated on the inside and outside to allow irrigation up through the stem of the light, you know, so there's so many things. I mean, I'm sure technology's changed a lot since those lights were chosen to.
For sure. All right, thanks, Ryan. All right, council updates. Sam.
Thank you. I attended about half of the planning commission meeting. I got a little bit late. I just happened to be driving by, and Lisa was involved with the portion where they were talking about this new development coming in. So that was informative and helped me a lot. And also I attended the watershed district meeting the other evening, which was rather long. And I think Ryan's project was on it. It was one of the things they had approved there. And then I've been attending the school board task force meetings for their funding task force. And they're just trying to figure out what to do with the funds that they have, and what the next step is going to be, and that they're going to be cutting about $2 million out of their budget at the next meeting. So those are the updates I have so far.
All right, thank you. Good.
Don't have too much to report. I did attend the Lions waffle breakfast on Saturday, and it looked like they had a good turnout. The Boy Scout troop did a tremendous job taking care of us senior people. So it was a fun event. Other than that, the only other comment I have, I will be attending the American Legion pie throwing contest March 30th. And I challenge anybody out there that wants to throw a pie at me, and I'm sure there's a few, probably a lot. Come on out, as long as you put up your money and no frozen pies.
They don't throw them very far ahead. They just, you know.
They kind of wish them.
And I will be there also. So.
Yeah, I'm planning on attending as well, so it's a great cause, well worth it. I did also make it up to the Lakes Area Expo. Great job, huge increase in attendance over the last expo, so that's going really well, and looking forward to next year. I think hopefully we'll see a double in size every year, so really good, and appreciate city staff, all the efforts they did for it, and a lot of businesses up there, so very, very informative. I attended the Planning Commission. That was a popular meeting the other night, and they did a great job. You know, the commission works really well together, so got to thank all of them for that. And tomorrow I am meeting with Ryan. We're going to try and push 180th a little closer to reality. So we'll have a meeting with a couple of neighboring communities and try and get everybody on one page to move forward with that. And Other than that, fairly quiet week for me as well. Go ahead.
I too will be at the Pie in the Face event on Friday, so with pony up some money for charity and I will welcome a pie in the face. Yesterday afternoon, attended the Vietnam Day service that was really well attended. It was standing room only and really great job by everybody who pulls that together, especially Diane Finneman, who just does a great job putting together a program every year. This year's theme or discussion was around an interview of 3 different tunnel rats. It was especially meaningful to my husband and I. My father-in-law served as a tunnel rat, and those are stories we don't hear in our family, so we soaked it up. It was fantastic. Would encourage everyone to see some of the video footage that's floating around of that day. Also attended the Planning Commission meeting. Again, a terrific meeting from them, and they always do great work. Also, we did our annual review with Midco at the last Cable Commission meeting. Had a good opportunity to have a lot of discussion around making sure that the city and Midco are on the same page for development and that they are taking the opportunities to get services in when those trenches are open. And as we know, that has not always been a successful plan. Obviously, the person who was there was not the person who's the final decision maker, but hopefully we did another attempt at opening those lines of communication and clarifying the process so that as we are doing development, they are getting those trenches in, because clearly once everything's in, it's incredibly expensive to get those services out, and that just hurts the future of that cause. So I would say no promises made. We didn't solve the world's problems, but some good discussion was had and certainly some follow-ups to come out of it.
Now, do you know if they're doing like Lighthouse Lofts or?
They are in Lighthouse Lofts, but there were a significant number of questions around the different stages, particular to Chestnut Creek, and some open questions that are making sure they're in those future phases.
You know how subscribership is doing?
So subscribership overall is down. However, they have maintained more so than some of their competitors. It speaks a little bit to there's not a lot of alternatives in some of our areas, and certainly some of our more rural areas. That is the best service provider other than going to a dish type service. So they have maintained more than, again, some of their competitors, but they are down a little, and would anticipate that as people continue to cut the cord, that continues to happen. So Cable Commission is doing a lot of work around alternative, how else are they bringing community messaging, and how else are they staying relevant and doing programming. I think if we hear from Paul coming up this summer and an update, you'll hear some of the things that he's doing with the schools and equipment and things to stay relevant, because again, that long term, there's a lot of strategic questions to be asked there.
All right. Thank you. Well, hearing nothing else, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.